Let's call to order the meeting. This is our Finance Committee meeting, and I'm glad that everybody is here. We made it through the rain. We have that nice tin roof so we can hear it, and I appreciate the leadership being here to help us through the budget. So I guess it's time to get started. Are there any comments by the Finance Committee minute? No? How about you?
Oh, I'm good.
You're wordless?
Oh, don't you worry, I'm
That
safe.
was funny.
You'll find.
I couldn't help it.
Really? You have nothing? That's what it
Don't
sounded
worry,
like.
we'll get there.
She knows the picking.
I've done this before.
Okay. How about you, Ken?
I'm good.
All right, we're good. Okay, so we're going to have our team member introductions.
Well, very good. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Finance Committee members. And SGWASA Board Chair, Mr. Gooch, thank you for being here this morning for this Finance Committee meeting on this dreary day that we have here with the rain versus sunshine that we're used to. So for the record, I'm Scott Schroyer, Executive Director for the South Granville Water and Sewer Authority. Chris?
I'm Chris Sutherland. I'm the Assistant Executive Director for South Granville Water and Sewer Authority.
I'm Richard Balmer, Finance Director and Board Treasurer for South Granville Water and Sewer Authority.
Reuben Carden, Assistant Finance Director for South Granville Water and Sewer Authority.
I am Crystal Lee, the PIO and Board Secretary for South Granville Water and Sewer.
Can they hear me?
I think so if you speak
No.
up.
I'm Priscilla Adcock. I'm the HR manager for South Granville Water and Sewer Authority.
Very good.
All right, thank you, everyone. So, committee members, this morning, we have an opportunity to present to you our draft fiscal year 25-26 budget. We have a lot of information to share with you this morning. We have items ranging all the way up to 11 this morning. And let me just kind of give you a brief overview of some of the topics we'll be discussing this morning on our agenda. We will provide you with a brief overview of the budgeting process and schedule for our budget adoption. We'll stress our goals for today's meeting. We'll talk about our current fiscal year, FY 24-25 adopted budget. And we'll spend a lot of time on a proposed fiscal year 25-26 budget review. We have an item that talks about personnel and position review for FY 25-26. We also have a section for other topics this year. Of course, this is a section that if anyone on the Finance Committee or the committee in general has some additional topics they want to add to the agenda, that's a perfect place to have it on the agenda. We also have comments and recommendations from committee members, and then we have adjournment. So again, we've got a lot to talk about this morning. Your packet is full of information, and I also just want to mention that our next Finance Committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, April 25th, 2025, beginning at 9 a.m. at Button Town Hall, basically in the same room. I would next like to turn to a brief overview of the budgeting process and schedule for budget adoption. So I think it's important for the committee to have a glimpse at our schedule of our budgeting process. And so what I've laid out for you here on page 5 of 36 is just our overview. And I just want the board members to know that budgeting is a continuous process involving a wide variety of team members at SGWASA who manage the current fiscal year's budget while planning for the next one. So even though we're focused on this next fiscal year budget, we're already thinking about 2 years from now or 3 years from now, or lining up programs along the way. So if we happen to slip up today and say FY 24 versus 25, 26, or 27, it's just to let you know that we've got a lot of that information floating out there as well in our heads. I provided for you on the schedule in front of you just a glimpse as to when we formally start our budget process in October, when we ask department managers to begin preparing for the upcoming fiscal year. And then basically as you look through the months, we basically end up with a lot of meetings, and we end up with the Finance Committee presentation, usually in February and March of the year. And then in April and May, we work towards having the required budget public hearing held by the Board of Directors. And this gives the Board of Directors an opportunity to look at the budget more thoroughly, gives the public an opportunity to comment on the budget. And then, of course, we look at finalizing our budget for the upcoming fiscal year to be approved by midnight on June 30th. So we have a couple of opportunities ahead of us for public hearing and budget adoption on the horizon. Any questions or comments just about our general structure of what we do to get to this point here today?
Well planned out.
Okay, well, thank you. I greatly appreciate all the team members helping us to get to this point as well. Even though I covered that schedule in 60 seconds, there's a lot of meetings involved in hours, aren't there, Richard?
A lot.
Okay. So let's talk about goals for today's meeting. The goals today are to provide the Finance Committee with a detailed review of the proposed FY 25-26 budget and to gain their recommendation on a final draft FY 25-26 budget. Now that may seem a little bit aggressive today as we sit here, but it is doable. So we'll work towards that today. All right, let's turn to item 6 on the agenda, our current fiscal year FY 24-25 budget review. And we start off with the budget ordinance. So at this point, I'd like to turn this over to Richard Ballmer, our Finance Director, and just have him walk through our current fiscal year 24-25 adopted budget ordinance. And we put this in the booklet for the Finance Committee just so that you have a reference to where we are currently versus what we will be proposing in the FY 25-26 budget. So Richard, if you would, cover these sections for us, maybe just at a high level. Thank you.
So the 24-25 budget ordinance, the major features and revenues was water revenues were 6.3 million, wastewater revenues 9.35 million, and then you had some interest revenue and non-billing revenue for a total revenue of 16,555,340. I won't read each department, but you see the expenditure breakdown, and those expenditures also equal $16,555,340. And then, of course, you've got the section 3, which is the authorization of how the records will be kept. That's a brief overview of the current year ordinance as it was originally adopted.
Any questions or comments from the Finance Committee members?
We took nothing out of fund balance last year, is that correct?
That's correct. You'll see on page 8 of your agenda package that last year we did not transfer anything to fund balance. We did increase revenues last year, I believe, with the rate increase.
Any other questions or comments? All right. Thank you, Richard. Let's move on to agenda item number 7, proposed fiscal year FY 25-26 budget review. Within this section, we have 3 items that we're going to review. We have the budget message and budget ordinance. We have a review of schedule of rates and fees. And then we have an item focusing on the proposed use of fund balance and the details associated with that. So turning to item 7A, the FY 25-26 budget message and budget ordinance. This budget message gives me the opportunity to really lay out in detail what this budget is that we're proposing here. It's quite lengthy, but again, it gives us an opportunity to kind of give you a highlight or a high-level summary of what our budget is about. In our budget document, this document sits at the front of the document and will be associated with the upcoming budget as well. So if I may, I would just like to take the time to read this into the record. And at the end of that, be able to jump back and have any questions or comments about that. I would like the Finance Committee members to know that the information that I talk about in this memo here, everything behind it is supported. So we have supporting documents that support everything that you're going to talk about here. So if you do have a question about a certain item within this cover document, most likely it's on the agenda, and we can get to that area of the agenda and cover that as well. So if I may, I'd just like to read this into the record. The proposed budget for fiscal year 25-26 is carefully designed to ensure it is balanced, meets the organization's debt obligations, and supports the annual operations of SGWASA's utility systems. Notably, the budget does not include a rate increase. Unlike the budgets of the 2 previous fiscal years, the FY 25-26 budget proposes the use of $1.33 million from the fund balance to address expenses associated with the pay study, the payroll pay period transition, and several major repair projects and capital outlays. The decision to use fund balance stems primarily from increased revenue received from interest income during the current fiscal year. The additional revenue provided by the interest income has created a unique opportunity for SGWASA to address a several-year backlog of requests from department managers for equipment purchases that will enhance service programs and improve efficiencies across the utility. Regarding staffing, the proposed FY 25-26 budget includes the addition of 3 new full-time positions. One position is an engineering field inspector to manage inspection duties for residential and commercial developments on the rise. The other 2 positions are entry-level utility operators who will be dedicated to water distribution system maintenance activities, including valve and hydrant maintenance, hydrant flow testing, hydrant flushing, and hydrant painting. These additional positions will enable SGWASA to establish a comprehensive hydrant and valve maintenance program, supported by the inclusion of the necessary equipment such as a trailer-mounted valve exercise machine. The position of Utility Engineer Operations Manager will remain on the organizational chart but will not be funded in FY 25 and 26. This decision reflects challenges experienced over the past 18 months in filling this role. A reevaluation of funding for this position is planned for the FY 26-27 budget. Pointing out some of the key revenue elements in the proposed budget. Water revenue projected to rise by $200,000 compared to our current fiscal year. Sewer revenues projected to rise by $200,000 compared to our current fiscal year. In terms of capital revenue, an allocation of $2.5 million to support utility infrastructure asset depreciation at 95%. The budget sets a near-term goal of achieving 100% funding for depreciation within 5 years. In terms of interest income or revenue, this has been increased by $417,460 compared to FY 24-25 to align with current projections. In terms of fee categories, all fee categories in the approved FY 24-25 schedule of rates, fees, and charges were reviewed to ensure alignment with the actual cost of service. No adjustment to the schedule of rates, fees, and charges is proposed for FY 25-26. Turning to the key payroll and benefits expense elements in the proposed budget. 2 new positions. 2 water distribution system utility maintenance mechanics are being requested and 1 engineering department field inspector. In terms of overall wage adjustments, a 3% increase to the position classification scale, funding for wage and position classification adjustments based on recommendations from the recently completed FY 24-25 compensation study, and up to a 4% performance merit increase for employees determined by annual performance reviews. Let's look at retirement contributions, a 0.75% increase mandated by the state of North Carolina for the local government employees retirement system. In terms of health benefits, projected increases of 8% for medical premiums and 5% for dental and vision premiums. A continued SGWASA matching contribution of 3% for the 401k program, and a medical insurance out-of-pocket cap of $500 per employee per month per employee remains in place. Key expenses and capital outlay in the proposed budget. Sizable increases in supply costs, fuel costs, and chemical costs are due to inflationary factors. Increases in services for maintenance and contract labor, professional services for general legal and engineering service support, software and technology, and increases in repairs and maintenance. With respect to insurance premiums, a projected 10% rise in property and liability insurance premiums. Workers' compensation, a projected 28% reduction in workers' compensation insurance premiums. And equipment investments, replacement or purchase of operating equipment amounting to $1,269,801. Mentioned previously, our depreciation expense allocates $2.5 million, funded at 95%. Some key programs in the proposed budget: mitigating PFAS in drinking water, completion of the PFAS pilot testing program at the water treatment plant funded by a $500,000 NCDEQ grant. The program commenced in October 2024 and is expected to conclude by August of 2025. Based on the pilot testing results, SGWASA will initiate and design a construction of PFAS reduction equipment to comply with the EPA deadline of April 26, 2029. As related to the I-85 SGWASA Sanitary Sewer System Improvement Project, construction project number 1 began on April 1st, 2025. Construction project number 2 is anticipated to be under construction by the 3rd quarter of fiscal year 25-26. In terms of the lead and copper service line identification plan, continue efforts to identify and address these service lines will continue. In terms of capital improvement projects, some upgrades to the wastewater treatment facility ongoing and improvements to the water distribution system. In terms of some focus on software implementation, we have new systems for human resources, HR record keeping and management, automated timekeeping and reporting, and additional tools for planning, permitting, and construction inspections. So in conclusion, the proposed FY 25-26 budget exemplifies SGWASA's commitment to fiscal responsibility and operational excellence by leveraging increased revenues and strategically utilizing the fund balance. This budget addresses critical staffing needs, infrastructure improvements, and equipment enhancements without increasing rates for customers. It positions SGWASA to sustain and improve service delivery while planning proactively for future challenges. Thank you for your continued support and dedication to SGWASA's mission in providing quality water and sanitary sewer services to our customers in an efficient, sustainable, and environmentally conscious manner. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I have a question under the health benefits section that you just read about. It says the medical insurance out-of-pocket cap of $500 per month per employee. That's only for the family plan, right? It's not just for all employees. We approved a no more than $500 cap for the family plan. Am I right, Kevin? That's what
But
we
it's
did.
for everybody, because even a single person will pay under $500, so it was for everybody.
Do we not cover the employee's insurance policy ourselves?
Who would like to speak to that?
I will, yes,
So
we
would you
cover
come
the
up- would you come
employees.
up-
We cover the employee,
The microphone.
so they don't pay
Please make sure the
$500.
microphone's
No,
on.
but it was for everybody, because if they want to add their family, they can add their family as well.
Right, so we pay for employee only.
Right.
And then you have an option for employee spouse, or employee children, or employee family.
Okay,
And all of those were over $500
okay.
that the employee would have to pay.
And we cut it back.
Yes, so each one of those, no matter which plan, you won't pay more than $500.
Just the way it's worded, it looked like it was just for the employee. I'm like, wait a minute, we cover the employees.
Oh, no.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
I have a question while you're still up there. So wage adjustments, I see a 3% increase for positions classification scale, and also a up to 4% performance merit increase for employees. Can you speak a little bit about what's the 3% increase for position classification scale? Explain that a little bit to me.
Yeah, that's a new category.
Is that for 3% of the cost of living?
Yes, that's
Yeah.
right.
Okay.
Which will
Yeah.
stage adjustment. So on
I was making sure I was missing something. Yeah, and then the up to 4%
It's just the merit
is for
increase.
the merit increase, yeah.
That's all I needed.
Question,
Mm-hmm.
while you're there. So the 3% increase, you're saying that's COLA?
Yes, ma'am.
Have you checked to see what the average COLA is compared to other organizations? I know that HR at Town Hall in Butner here, she checks that out before she presents, and sometimes there's a range that she can offer us.
Well, and I think that because we do evaluation increases, and we'll get a little further into the pay study, kind of bring this all together and making that 3% will make more sense. But that's generally the norm.
I
Richard,
know NCLM told us it's between 3 and 4 this year.
Well, we
Told Creedmoor.
were
anyway.
told different,
Oh, you were?
yeah.
Is it higher or lower?
I think it was up to 3, but I think we chose 2
Okay.
for COLA. Did you want to speak?
So, yeah, I do appreciate that. Thank you, Priscilla, as well. You can stay there in case there's additional questions. So we do surveil what's going on around us, obviously, and we don't simply just pick a number based on what others are doing. It's always good to know what others are doing around us. So as Priscilla talked about, we've got some items going on in this budget this year that we felt that a 3% wage schedule adjustment was a good place to start. And we like to be conservative on that. Of course, we'll take direction from the finance committee and from the board, whether that goes up or down. I think some of the things that you'll see later on in our presentation about the compensation study that we did. Many of you will remember over the last couple of years, especially during COVID and post-COVID, there were sizable COLA adjustments put out there by many agencies, some as high as 6%, 10%, 15%. This board has done a fantastic job of annually addressing the wage schedule adjustment for us at a very stable average percentage of usually about 3%. And what that allows us to do is increase that schedule and remain competitive throughout the region as we're competing for other operators, other employees, licensed equipment operators, so on and so forth. So we do take that into consideration. We thought our recommendation here of 3% was a good place to start. And that's why you find it in this budget recommendation this morning.
So I can just speak about the city of Durham. The city of Durham, the max you can get is a 5% raise, and that's COLA, everything, merit increase, all as one. So by this, you could get up to a 7%. I know people are not going to get 4 and 3, but by this, they could get up to a 7% max.
Possibly.
So why is it worded position classification scale instead of COLA in this document?
We moved away from COLA several years ago, and we actually have a compensation schedule that will be presented to the board, to the finance committee. It really isn't presented until after we get past these meetings and we understand what this adjustment is, because we go back and adjust the entire schedule. But we do have a schedule. I don't think I have a copy of it here that I can pull up for you, but it basically lists every position within the organization for us and what their 3 ranges are.
Starting,
entry,
mid,
or low,
and
mid, and
max.
high.
Minimum, midpoint, max.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we have that schedule and we have all those job classifications within that schedule, basically on those steps. And if the board were to approve a 3% schedule adjustment, we basically adjust that entire schedule up 3%. So we keep those wages, if you would, relative to our area around us as well, offset inflation, those type of factors that come into play.
When's the last time we did a compensation study?
We just completed one this year.
Okay.
Yeah, it
All right.
we'll speak to that later, but just some highlights for you. Our personnel manual that the board approved in 2019, it was an update, and there were recommendations in there to remain competitive that the board should consider the schedule adjustments annually, and also at least every 5 years take a look at that compensation study. So that was part of what we did this fiscal year. And we've completed that study, and we have some recommendations for you here. There's some things that we can talk about. It's very high level. There's a lot of personnel information we don't discuss. So I just hope the board respects that as well, which of course that you do.
So will we? Huh?
I like the way Durham's doing it.
Yes, I do too. Will we have, be able to see the document of the classification study?
The
It's usually in
document
here.
itself,
Yeah, is it in here?
It usually is.
Okay,
right? There's a couple documents we can discuss when we get to that point.
okay,
For
got
sure.
you,
Yeah, it's
okay.
coming up in the document.
Sorry, I
I
missed
think
that.
the only thing that we didn't supply today was a copy of the existing classification schedule. But at a break, we can make some copies
Okay,
and provide that to the committee if you'd like to have that as a resource document in front of you.
I'd appreciate it, thank you.
And I have a question about the 401k program. We're gonna put a pause on raising that this year.
Yeah, and there was some discussion as to why. And,
Okay.
you know, that all kind of come together with the
'Cause I
pay
know
study and.
we kind of had a goal of eventually reaching 5%.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
so what was kind of decided, Scott, are we kind of doing a year skipping, adding 1%?
Well, let's focus on, I can see on screen here in our health benefits, we have a continued SGWASA matching contribution of 3% for the 401k program. And Richard, I believe in our discussions in the last couple of months regarding this item in particular, we're seeing greater participation by employees in the 401k program. And I think if I recall correctly, when we instituted this program 3 years ago, possibly, maybe more,
We started it.
Tim was still the chair.
4
Yeah.
years ago, there was a goal to increase that percentage, and we talked about that annually at the finance committee meetings, where the committee would like to go. I know Mr. Gooch, you had mentioned for the last couple of years trying to inch our way up to 5 and 6%. So we have greater participation from employees, which is great for this program. I'm not sure I think we're above the 50% mark. So we are seeing it climb. We just don't have a recommendation plugged in this year to increase that, looking across our entire budget and our costs. We thought we would keep that percentage static, but would be open to discussion and recommendations from the Finance Committee, things that we can look at. One of the things that, the question that is normally asked, not only on this item, but maybe some of the other items, what would it cost for an additional 1%? You know, based on participation, if the organization were to increase that to 4%, what net effect would that have on our budget as far as an increase? So
Is this discussed later on as well, 401k?
I'm not sure if we dive into it specifically, but we can continue to discuss it or put it on our schedule here to have this information. We don't normally do calculations on the fly, but if that's something that the board would be interested in knowing what those values are, I'm sure we can work on that during the break or try to get some information.
Yes, I
back.
think it'd be helpful.
This, and this may be better to keep it level year to see how much our participation is. And that'll give us a better indication next year of what it costs to raise it another percent.
That's what I wanted to ask. How has the participation since we went up to 3, has it changed in the last year? Have we increased? Because I know we were pretty low on participation last
Well,
year.
I know, I'll say since I've been here, I always, encourage the
Right,
employees.
right.
Let them understand that you're already contributing 6% to the
Yeah.
retirement system. 8% is a good way to go for saving for retirement. So, of course, I can't tell them what to do,
Of course not.
but I can let them know that it's a good thing. And people, they join. Sometimes they want to see what their check's going to look like before they do.
Mhm.
Some people come back and they'll stop for a little bit.
Yeah.
It's the way that the economy is, and everything's so expensive, and especially a lot of the younger people.
Yeah.
But they do participate, and it has gone up quite a bit since I got here.
So can you get me a number of how many employees are participating in the match? Thank you.
Yeah. And, I can see the merit in keeping it flat for a year to get a better handle on.
And because we have done 1% every year, I know since I've been here. So
So the projected increase for medical premiums is 8. Last year we had a projection and then the numbers came in kind of pretty low compared to what the projection was. Is this a high projection or are we close?
well, we haven't gotten the rates back yet, but I always talk to our broker. We just sort of go on kind of
What they
what's
tell us.
going on around us. And, he always go a little high for your projections.
Okay.
So, Commissioner, just to support where we were this year, in our fiscal year, we had projected increases of 15%.
Right.
In our current fiscal year, so just to give you a comparison, not quite half, 8%. So is it a lower increase, which is great.
Yeah.
Versus this current year, the increase of 15% to medical premiums, 5% to dental and vision premiums as well.
I know we haven't gotten to this yet, but just by what I wrote down for myself as we've been discussing, was to take the COLA down to a 2% and move the 401k to a 4%.
Well, I think once we get through and it'll help to better it'll make more sense when we get to the pay study aspect. And you'll kind of see what our thinking was.
I think that we'll keep that under consideration for sure. We'll note that and address that when we talk further about the compensation schedule, because what you end up potentially doing is if you have 47% of your employees participating in the 401k plan, they have an opportunity to increase by 1% for that 40%, which is great. And maybe if it was 6 or 8%, you have more employees that volunteer to do that. Our schedule adjustment is for all employees, so it affects all employees. So You can, if you want to make it a 2% schedule adjustment across the board for all employees, that is all employees. Maybe others would want to take advantage of joining the program or realizing that 1% increase as well for their future. You've got some current dollars, basically in your classification compensation schedule. You've got some future dollars that you're saving for as well. So we'll take a look at that when we get to that point and determine what blend the finance committee recommends for us.
And I do, get feedback from the employees, and I share that with them, and sometimes it's hard to push the 401k because they can't see the results right away in their check. They're not getting that money.
Well, and if they're young, they don't
And
realize
yes. And even
how
some of
much
those
they're gonna
other
need it
ones,
later.
I mean, it's tough.
Yeah.
So when you kind of weigh both, these folks want to see some more increase in their check.
Right.
The 401k
Take home
stuff,
money.
they're, oh, I'm young, I got all this time to save.
Till you get old.
So you get old.
But then you panic.
But they know they're contributing that 6% too.
Who's calling it? Silence on.
Was last year's budget 4% for the performance merit program?
it's 3.
Yes, it's always.
Yeah, it's always up to 4%.
Up to 4.
Right,
I
yeah.
thought it
So
was
this
3
performance
last year.
evaluations done throughout the year, so, based on basically your merits within your evaluation and your tallied score, it's based on a calculation that gets you then to a percentage. I think we've had 4% in place, at least the 5 years I've been here. Yeah.
I know you're tired of hearing this question, but I'm going to ask you anyway. Under capital improvements, we have upgrades to the water treatment facility, and I know we have the SGWASA sewer project going
Yeah.
on. I won't call it anything else.
Mhm.
What is going on with the 2 digesters at the wastewater treatment plant? I mean, we fixed 2. We
Right.
were going to fix the other 2
Right.
5 years ago.
Right, so in our CIP plan that the board approved, I think it's this fiscal year coming up, I'll have to double check, that we're proposing. I think there's engineering, associated with that project to do the engineering for those digesters. There is no construction set up for that program because our construction dollars are basically going to the SGWASA sewer improvement project. As far as our share, so we had to manage our CIP.
Okay, that makes
But
sense.
Let me just double check. I don't want to misspeak. Yes, we have proposed in our 25-26 fiscal year CIP, which I normally don't bring to the board until after July, because we close out the fiscal year in June, and then Richard provides me with the value that we actually have to use for our CIP. We have an estimate. We take that value and then put it back into our schedule, and then I present the schedule to the board for their review and approval. This is something that we started last year. The board may recall, I think August was the time the board approved the CIP schedule for us. But there is $75,000 set aside at the wastewater treatment plant for digesters 1 and 2, repairs including ancillary system components, engineering only.
Didn't we do the engineering when we did 3 and 4?
Well, yes and no. So let me dive into that for a moment. So we have 4 digesters at the plant. We had 2 that failed on us about 2 years ago when they were emergency repairs, somewhere close to $350,000, less than $400,000 for those repairs. The idea was, well, if you have 4 total, the other 2 are going to need it at some point in the future. So we've looked at where can we place that $400,000 or $500,000 expense on our schedule for digester repairs. In the meantime, what we've done is we've discovered some better technology, more efficient technology for those units, and we're moving in that direction. Hence the engineering that we have, basically for a component changeover, and to try in our new digesters, which are more energy efficient for us. We'll bring our costs down at the wastewater treatment plant as far as the energy costs. There's a lot of blowers and motors associated with that process that we have at that facility. So in coordination with the wastewater superintendent, we're looking at implementing some newer technologies in those new digesters for that
I
construction.
need a break. I need a break. I need a break for 1 minute. I'm sorry.
Would you like me to pause?
Yeah, let's pause.
Okay.
Everyone's here.
I'm sorry.
Let's start.
All right. Well, thank
Begin where we left off.
Yeah, well, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to continue where we are. During the break, we took the opportunity to do two things. We were able to get copies of the SGWASA classification scale that we were just talking about, effective July 1st, 2024. I would ask the committee to allow us to present that when we get to item 8 on our agenda, if that would be okay.
Okay.
That's really appropriate at that section. And then Richard Ballmer, our finance director, has informed me that he was able to do a calculation during the break on that 1% for the 401k program. Is that something that you would like to discuss now? Just continue with that number?
Yeah, please.
So worst case scenario, if you assumed 100% participation, which is not gonna happen, you're talking about 32 to 35,000. But realistically, based on participation rates, that number would be 12 to 15,000 for each 1%.
Okay.
15,000, assuming that you increase a few more employees kicking in.
Could you say that again for me? 1% equals what?
12,000, 15,000 based on current participation trends.
Okay.
12,000 if the same number of people kept the same percentage. If a few more people added in, it could be as much as 15.
Okay. How much? 1% equal.
Well, I always use his worst case scenario, which would have been 15,000.
Okay.
You said 100% participation is 35.
100% would be 35,000.
At current pay scale.
Right.
35? Oh, I thought you said 32.
32 to 35.
32 to 35.
I always go with worst
You're
case
going a
scenario.
high one.
Yep.
Okay, got it.
But you said that's based on current pay scale.
He talks a little
That's
fast
telling
for me.
you that's
Well,
based on pay
right.
scale.
Assuming all these other things are
Yes, sir.
in the budget, I should have said budgeted pay scale.
Budget was, yes, sir.
Well, thank you, Richard, Finance Committee. Tuck that in and we'll come back to that if you would like, or if you want to
Okay.
address that now, but we do have some compensation items to bring up, as I mentioned, in item 8, our personnel and position review, which has the compensation study, payroll transition, and proposed positions. All right, well, moving on, so we're in our current section here. The next item is our FY 25-26 proposed budget ordinance. And so we're going to spend a little bit more time on this budget ordinance. I'm going to turn this over to Richard, and Richard is going to read this for us, and we'll focus in on the details, okay?
Sure, thank you. So I'll read the whole ordinance since this is the proposed ordinance for the record. Be it ordained by the Board of Directors of SGWASA, North Carolina. Section 1, it is estimated that the following revenues will be available in the Water and Sewer Fund for the fiscal period beginning July 1st, 2025 and ending June 30th, 2026. In comparison to the approved fiscal year 24-25 budget, fiscal year 25-26 water sales and sewer use charges were estimated using a revenue increase of $200,000 for water, a revenue increase of $200,000 for sewer, and $1,228,553 for capital. Revenue section, water revenues, budgeted at $6,500,000. Wastewater revenues, budgeted at $9,550,000. Non-billing revenue, budget $640,750. Interest income, budgeted $850,000. Other financing sources, budgeted at $0. Transfer from fund balance, appropriated fund balance, $1,330,076, for a total revenues and other financing sources of $18,870,826. Following amounts are hereby appropriated in the Water and Sewer Enterprise Fund for the fiscal period beginning July 1st, 2025 and ending June 30th, 2026. Expenditures. The Administration Department, $1,333,251. Human Resources Department, $166,476. Engineering Department, $639,216. Billing and Collections Department, $580,955. Raw Water Department is $0, and we'll explain that later in the meeting. Water Treatment Plant Department, $2,693,891. Wastewater Treatment Department, $2,716,264. In the Utilities Division, we We have 4 departments: meter reading department, $180,848; water line maintenance department, $1,296,747; sewer line maintenance department, $1,656,987; pump station and towers, $1,039,164. Depreciation board and other department, $2,802,292. Projects and studies, $23,500. Debt service, $3,741,235, for a total expenditures of $18,870,826. Section 2, the grand totals of estimated revenues and other financing sources and expenditures and other financing uses for all funds for the fiscal period beginning July 1st, 2025 and ending June 30th, 2026 are shown below. Revenues, $18,870,826. Expenditures, $18,870,826.
Yeah, go ahead and finish section 3, please, thank you.
Section 3, the executive director shall have the authority to reallocate appropriations between line items, except for salary and benefits within a department up to a maximum of $10,000. Such appropriations must be recorded like other reappropriations and reported at a subsequent board meeting after the funds are moved. All transfers must be in accordance with the North Carolina General Statutes. The executive director shall not have any authority to appropriate fund balance or to increase total appropriations. Finance director shall establish and maintain all financial records which, in accordance with this ordinance and in accordance with the appropriate state statutes of the state of North Carolina.
Thank you, Richard. You will notice at the bottom of page 1, Crystal, if you'll go back to page 1. Okay, so we have a note, the raw water Lake Holt department was merged. I can't read all of it. What was that merged? What's the note? Please read that, Chris.
No, the raw water Lake Holt department was merged into the water treatment plant department starting in fiscal year 25-26.
Okay, so the reason for that is we had a separate department for raw water, and it was not many line items in that department, would you say, Richard? Just a few. And basically the raw water system that we have is kind of germane to the water treatment plant itself. So we weren't sure why we should continue to separate those budgets. So we basically just decided, and especially the recommendation of our finance director, just to kind of roll those expenses, if you will, forward into the water treatment budget. We'll just manage it that way. So at this point, you'll see the $0 amount in the budget for the expenditures, and I would anticipate that will just disappear next year, correct?
We'll actually remove it before the final ordinance, so we have to leave it in for the finance committee here.
Okay. So let's scroll back up to the top for a moment, please, Crystal. All right, so finance committee members, any questions about any of the section 1 description or the revenues that we've proposed?
It's nice to see interest income up there again. Billing and collections is going up 50,000 from last year. Is that because of Tyler,
Software costs.
the software cost? There's an annual fee for them to maintain, correct? Is that what the 50,000 is?
Well, that's.
Some of it.
Yeah, that's right. The other thing that is built into both that and the administration department is that we are still sunsetting the old software system. So there is some overlap of cost in 25-26. We're still paying the old company some and the new company some. So there's kind of duplication of cost that's inflating that number for the 50,000 you mentioned.
So with this new system, and I'm getting off topic a little bit on this, but my question is, are we gonna need any more staff to maintain our billing and collections? I didn't see it in the proposal. I didn't see a staff increase.
I think that we let me answer it this way. Not on the immediate horizon, but looking across the organization comprehensively. Most recently, while we were looking at our space needs study, which is a study that's going on, just getting ready to wrap up. This item was part of our current budget that the board approved for
we did 5, 10, and 15-year planning scenarios for all operations. And we see, just based on the increase in the amount of customers on the horizon that we see some pressures maybe in year 5 coming up with that. So really, it's a volume base. So if you start to increase your customer base, you're going to have more transactions going on. Of course, we'd like most of those transactions to be done without coming into the office, those type of things. But there's also, as you grow your business, there's also support that's needed as well in the organization. So we've taken a look at that. I appreciate that question. We've done a lot of planning scenarios for that. The reason we went through those 20 and 30-year planning scenarios is we wanted to look at ultimately where do we see the organization 25, 30 years from now. And we then back that down to current year. And then we say, okay, sometime in this planning horizon, we need this much square footage, this much office space, these type of functions within the utility. So it helped us from a planning perspective. So it was a really good exercise to look at that. And some might think, how 30 years? How can you think out 30 years? Well, let's go back to the year 2000. Where are we today? We're at 2025. Time goes by very quickly. So.
Well, when you're talking about space and building and all that, I'm going to remind you that there's a school facility in the city of Creedmoor that will be coming up for sale in the next year. And I think it's a great space.
Okay. Well, we look forward to whoever owns that donating that to us.
He didn't hear it, I don't think.
So under projects and studies,
Yes.
County, the schools on that building.
huh?
The schools on that building.
I know.
The county.
But the county kind of owns it. I would like to suggest to the board that we hire either Davenport Financial or Reftelis to do a financing study for the SGWASA sewer expansion. Since we are looking for money, we've only got five million coming. So we need to 21 million. I'd like to have a Davenport Financial did a study for the city of Creedmoor for our police department, and they did a great job. Reftelis did a great job for us when we did our rate study a couple of years ago. But I would like to find out if there's a interest in hiring one of these companies to figure out the best way to fund the project that we have coming. The outstanding PFAS project. Sorry, I said sewer project. I'm talking about the PFAS project.
Okay, I was wondering.
Yeah.
I thought about that.
Did you miss a meeting? No, I'm sorry.
No, I
PFAS
was going to
project.
say, how could she do that?
Sure, and I would just like to offer to the Finance Committee that in item 9 other topics, 9C, we talk about PFAS CIP funding. I just had a note there. We suggest we discuss this item at the next Finance Committee meeting. And if you think that would be appropriate at that time to at least have that discussion on what we can do internally versus what we would need externally or how they would complement each other, that may be a good opportunity to focus in on that. Now, I suggested that for the next meeting with the idea that I was anticipating we might be able to get through today's meeting and cover 85 to 90% of the topics that we needed to cover today. Having a second meeting, a lot of times it's just kind of follow-up items. I thought we might have some space in the next meeting that we could spend maybe 90 minutes, maybe an hour, taking a look at this topic for PFAS funding. But it's up to the Finance Committee, and it also depends on kind of where we end up today with this budget. But I would throw that out that we need an opportunity to sit down with the Finance Committee and go through these values, because I think we all understand the project and the timeline based on that wonderful PFAS discussion we had at the last board meeting. So
Okay.
I would offer that to you if you find that acceptable. But
As long as you think we have the time to wait, it's fine with me.
Well, I think, are you not suggesting April 25th when we meet again?
Correct,
Yeah.
2 weeks.
Yeah.
Okay, 2
Yeah.
weeks.
Yeah.
you know,
It's fine.
we still know what the number is, right? Yes, we still know the estimated cost for the project, $25 to $30 million.
Yeah.
So we're able to have that discussion. Richard has the ability to run some scenarios for us as well, just to talk about how we would fund or finance something like that, and then we can also have further discussion on the topic that you just put out there for us.
Okay.
So And what we'll do at the end of this meeting, we have a checklist here. You can see Chris writing down a lot of notes here. We're gonna go through this checklist at the end just to make sure that we've captured all of the dialogue and understand what we're gonna talk about at the next meeting, what's been approved, those types of things. So if we miss that at the end, just let us know. We'll put that on our worksheet, okay?
Okay, well, let's continue.
All right, well, very good. If there's no further questions on the budget ordinance, we will continue on to item 7B, which is the FY 25-26 proposed budget review of schedule of rates and fees. So in terms of the background, annually, SGWASA staff conducts a thorough review of the current fiscal year schedule of rates and fees. We call this the schedule to assess whether any updates are needed for the upcoming fiscal year. The process ensures that the services and fees accurately reflect the true cost of providing service. Following this year's review of the approved schedule, the executive director and finance director are recommending no changes to the existing schedule. We look forward to engaging additional conversation with the committee members to discuss this further topic. And the schedule of rates and fees is an integral companion document to the annual budget and is adopted each year by the board of directors as part of the budget approval process. So I'm just going to hold up for you before she scrolls to the next topic. Within the budget book that we publish, we have not repair projects and capital yet. We're not there. We have an entire section called Schedule of Rates, Fees, and Charges. So this is the companion document that has all of our rates and fees in it. So when we do the budget and present it to the board, either both in the public hearing as well as for final adoption, we ask the board to approve that companion document as well because it supports basically what we're asking for. Again, there's a lot of services in there. There's a lot of fees. Again, we try to balance those that the fees accurately reflect the true cost of providing service. We went through a major update about 3 years ago because our costs were a little bit out of line that we were providing. So it provides a good document for us in understanding of what those fees and charges are related to. So any questions or comments by the committee members? None?
None.
All right, we will turn our attention now to item 7C, which is the FY 25-26 proposed use of fund balance and the details associated with that. Just a little bit of background here. The proposed budget proposes the use of fund balance to address expenses associated with various items. The decision to use fund balance this fiscal year stems primarily from the increased revenue received from interest income during our current fiscal year, FY 24-25. The additional revenue provided by the interest income has created a great opportunity for SGWASA to address several years of backlog requests from department managers for items that will enhance service delivery and improve efficiency across the utility. I think underscore backlog of requests. So what we do on an annual basis during the budget process is we ask all the department managers to list their requests for us and associated costs based on actual estimates that they've gone out and received. They present us with a laundry list of requests for different programs that we have. And this can be replacements of a lawnmower, a tractor, a vehicle, or new equipment. We look at those lists, prioritize those. I will let you know that this going through that process, that's one of the most challenging parts of putting the budget together, quite honestly, because we understand the operating expenses, but trying to ensure that we're aligning our operations, our programs with the strategic plan, with the goals of the organization, the direction from the board. There's always more wants than there is money to support those. So we actually go through a priority process. Chris led the charge this year with the department managers, did a fantastic job, and he's going to go through the details when we get to that part if the board wants to focus on that. But I'll let you know that we look at prioritizing these items that are being requested, and we come up with a list and we provide that to the board every year. And again, I must mention that there's always more wants and needs than there is budget to support that. So we put a lot of those projects off and push them to what we call the parking lot, kind of off to the side. And then every budget year, we try to bring a couple more back onto the schedule, see what we can fund. There's always budget pressures for equipment and personnel. The board's very aware of that. When we took a look at the interest income that came in this year, we had budgeted an amount what was the amount we budgeted, 400,000 in our interest income, Richard, for fiscal year? I think we mentioned that, 485,000. We eclipsed that amount in the first quarter of this fiscal year. So we have some interest income that's basically in the bank, if you will. And we thought this would be a great opportunity to play catch up in using fund balance. So we do not like to use or recommend using fund balance to support operations because you can get into trouble if you can eat up your fund balance very quickly, putting it towards operations. So I think that you could see from our budget this year, we're very stable with our revenues to support our operations. And again, talking to our team members here, we thought this would be a great opportunity to leverage some of that interest income that we have and put towards these programs for us. So looking at some additional detail on the screen here, I'm just going to hit some of these bullet items in front of you. We have a proposed program for a payroll transition costs, including payroll taxes, retirement, 401k match. Total projected program cost of $163,000. The next program is a pay study implementation, including associated benefits. Full projected program cost $85,000, and we'll get into more detail on that. We have a proposed FY 25-26 capital outlay with an attached list of $1,269,801. And then we also have a proposed program for repairs and maintenance list of just over $254,000. So let's pause there. And let's ask the committee if they have any questions in general before we would get into any details on the attached list. Committee members, any questions about, I guess, just programmatically the approach, I guess is what I'm looking for, some feedback on what we're proposing here in terms of the use of fund balance.
So I guess my first question is going to be $85,000 for the implementation, including associated benefits for the pay study.
Mm-hmm.
So we're that far behind.
In terms of a lift to the overall schedule, yes. Yes.
And that's done every 5 years currently, correct?
It's recommended that we do it at least once every 5 years. Now, there may be benefits to doing it maybe every 3 years. I'm not sure who's familiar with the compensation studies, but at least doing an evaluation across the agencies. But at a minimum, it was recommended and approved in our personnel manual that 5 years is really what we should be looking at, so we don't get too far behind. It just costs you more money in the end, potentially.
Do we see that being an issue, waiting 5 years?
I guess I would have to ask the team. I haven't asked them this question. Priscilla, why don't you come to the podium?
Yeah.
So, I'd just like to mention that I think the board of directors have done a great job in the last 5 years with increases in the schedule itself, whether it be on average 3%. We've had some years that have been 3%, 4%, 5%, which has been fantastic. So doing this evaluation here in 5 years, we thought was appropriate. I thought we would come in better place than we actually did. But as I mentioned previously, during the COVID years, some of the COLAs were just all over the place. Mm-hmm. So question for Priscilla, we've just completed a 5-year study. Do you have any perspective on whether or not that should be 3 years or 4 years, or do you have a sense of the market space around us that we evaluated?
I think that 5 years is a good point. And to what Scott said, during COVID, that really put a hit on a lot of pay for a lot of jobs in municipalities. Sometimes more than what we could pay an operator. It's those positions that really you'll see with the results from the pay study. These folks had to get really competitive, especially during COVID.
The only reason I was asking about going to a different, whether it be 3 or 4 years, are we missing out on some of these operators?
No, I don't think so, because I don't feel like that if COVID had not happened, I don't feel like things would have gotten so off. Because we do update the pay scale with, COLA increases.
I would like to mention this, that I think if we're able to get us to where we need to be this year with the schedule adjustment for the pay study implementation, we'll have an opportunity that is pretty much a low-cost service that we can look at professionally and determine if we see that the market's being a little bit volatile, or if we believe that it's a good use of an expense. I think our cost this year was under $10,000 for the professional service. It is something that we could surveil maybe 3 years out, just to kind of get a peek, just kind of see where we are at a 3-year mark or a 4-year mark, instead of waiting to the 5-year mark.
That's a great idea. So if something happens.
Yeah, we just, and I think that with the committee bringing that to our attention, we see it as, we're kind of programming it every 5 years, at least we want to do this, but there may be an opportunity to take a look a little bit sooner and look at this. And a lot of this information too, these schedules, this is public information. We can grab some of these schedules as well, just to see what's going on around us. And just one other note, I'd like to mention that during COVID, the board did increase the schedule, the COLA for us during that period. And the board also offered a one-time payout for all the employees. And the conscious decision was made to make the payout versus adding it to the schedule because of the repercussions, the continuous compensation schedule lift. Well, I think we took a little bit different path than others, and here we are today.
So we just did a pay study, a composition study, and it was, I think the projected cost on this is a little high because ours was $40,000.
You're what?
Do we have an actual
What was
number
that?
for
What
this?
was 40,000,
85,000?
please?
I'm sorry?
What was 40,000?
We did a compensation study.
You just said this was
The cost of the
10,000.
study was only $8,000.
Okay.
Oh,
What'd you
so
say?
85 is
He just said it was
What
only
it would
8.
take to get the employees
Yeah.
up to.
Oh, okay.
Oh, all right, because I thought that was just for the study.
Yeah,
That's
no.
what I thought it was. I'm like,
Yeah.
80?
So that 85, that includes the
Well, how much
cost.
did he say to put?
Yeah, we paid for
Pay
this,
study
yeah, the study
application.
was
I wrote
budgeted
down
in
110.
mine.
It was
in
$8,000
my
So the
for
85
This is
to
just to
Okay.
implement what they
85,000 to get
suggest.
everybody
All right, I
up
got it.
Oh,
to where they need to be.
okay.
So if we implement this, how much of a change in their pay, or is that included in the 3%, the COLA and the merit that you're suggesting?
Well, when we get to that item, and I'd like to, if we could focus on that
All right.
item, because there's an entire 2 or 3
Yeah.
page memo that
Okay.
focuses on all these
Okay.
items. Spoiler alert, there are some positions that had to be changed from one step to another.
That's
previously,
fine.
And there
Ranges.
was others that just had minimal adjustments within the range. That's what's occurring here. So you get a flavor for that when we talk about that next, as far as the number of employees across the organization.
And this number would have been a lot higher had we not been updating the pay scale over the last 5 years.
I guess in regards to schedule, you mentioned, less than 5 years. I think kind of the norm around the area is 5 years, and, you try to throw out outliers if you can. Of course, COVID was definitely something that caused outliers. In previous places I've worked, I had people getting 25% increases within 2 years.
I told Scott the same.
So, it's hard to account for that. So, as far as the schedule, I would try to keep it at 5 years if you could. And if you have outliers such as COVID or something like that, then you have the ability to be flexible within that schedule.
And two, our workforce is, we're still not a new organization, but, we're not that old. And a lot of our employees, we've not been here a long time. So that's something else that take into account. The longer that people are here and they get increases and they go for different certifications to increase their pay.
Yeah.
So,
And you mentioned the organization not being that old. January will be 20 years that SGWASA took over
mhm.
operations.
And I mean that
It
in
was-
comparison to like City
Yeah.
of Henderson, City of Durham, things like that,
Yeah.
WASA.
Yeah, and it was
And really our
formed-
workforce, because if you look at who's here now,
Yeah.
we have one person left
Mhm.
from the original folks that came from the state.
In the whole company?
Yes.
Okay. It's Richard.
No.
I didn't come from the state.
No.
I came right after the state.
So we would be happy to drill down on this case study implementation on that item that's coming up, if that's okay with the committee.
Yes,
And we can roll to the next page.
Yep.
And
let's do that.
we can give you a preview of all of the proposed requests. You'll look at this table, so I'll just read across from the top. Obviously, this is a proposed capital outlay that accounts to 510 and the account 520. There's a difference in the way we account for these. And you can see from the far left, we'll just start at the top, 7110 administration, laptop replacement for the finance director at $2,000. And then we provide you with notes in the far right column. So we go through this same format template all the way down through all the departments to give you an idea, a flavor of what we're requesting in this budget. So we'd be happy to
So
address
Rubens is
any,
newer than Richards.
we would be happy to answer any questions that you have on items. And if you don't have any questions, we'll maybe ask Chris to highlight a couple of items for us that are important, very important. So Chris, if you go back up to the first page and just hold it there. Thank you. So the finance committee members, do you have any questions on any items any highlights that we should address first?
Do we have any vehicles that need to be surplus at this point?
We have vehicles that are being replaced, proposed replacements, that some will be surplus and some will actually be used for a new program or two, repurposed, just to keep our expenses down. So when we go through an annual auction, right, Richard?
So this replace of 2010 Ford Explorer, that Ford Explorer will be surplus or
The
repurposed?
specific vehicle is looking to be surplus.
Okay,
I'll be happy to answer as many questions or go as deep or as shallow as you want me to on any information here.
just a question, what's happening with the Toyota? Your old vehicle?
Wasn't a Toyota.
Well, I thought it was.
It was a
Nissan?
Nissan.
Okay, so the Nissan is actually used by engineering department.
Okay,
And also kind of general services, we call it, so we have availability out there for that. So Chris uses that vehicle,
okay,
admin can use that, engineering.
okay.
All right, so, I mean, you want me to highlight some of the big items or?
If the committee, would you like anything? No?
Unless it's
A lot of, we just wanted to make sure that we had details for you in case you had some questions about items.
Did you,
Okay.
have you
I'm
looked
good.
at this
Yeah.
page? You all right? Okay.
All right, let's see, proposed repairs and maintenance, same thing, we have a schedule for that, that's on page 22. It's a little bit of a smaller list for us here. Any questions by the finance committee members?
Just fire hydrant repair, what category does that come under? Because I saw that in the ordinance, the fire hydrant repairs and flow testing and all that.
That would be in our water line maintenance team,
Okay.
the 7139, I believe, is that
Okay.
correct?
Yes, sir.
Right, so, I think if you jump back on the previous schedule, I think that you would see a request for a valve exercise machine specific to that, plus there's some other items to support the flow monitoring that we're doing for that program. So there is some capital equipment associated with that request. When you start a new program, in addition to your human resources that you need, you're gonna need some support equipment for that as well. So we have some testing equipment, valve exercise machine for our valve systems, for our hydrants. And I think that we've looked at repurposing one of the vehicles that we have currently so that the two technicians basically have a vehicle to drive. So you do have some startup costs, obviously, for these type of programs to get going. And we've put that into this schedule as well, this budget.
Because on page 22, under water line maintenance, it says none requested. And
On
I'm,
page 20, it shows,
okay.
I think.
Chris, you want to point out on page 20?
Sure. Page 20, if you look under 7139, you should see two different things. One, replace portable valve turning key, and the second one for the new positions, the portable valve exercise machine, the trailer mount. So this is definitely right associated with the two new positions for hydrant and valve maintenance.
Okay.
Currently, we don't have an exercise program that we do, and so this is getting us to more of a proactive maintenance program for valves and fire hydrants. So I think this will meet the requests of many of the municipalities as far as fire hydrant maintenance.
Scott, meter readers. I know, didn't we purchase some last year? Meter readers of the new ones?
As far as the meters or the meter reading equipment?
Meter reader equipment.
Okay, we are always upgrading meter reading equipment. And one of the items that we have in here, I think, is for some technology, maybe some tablets, laptops in the trucks. Is that what I'm seeing? Right. On the page right now that I can see in front of you. So we have, we've worked with different technologies, anywhere from phones to tablets and laptops the last couple of years. And we kind of landed on laptops as being the better item, similar to what you see Richard using here on his desktop here, that's portable. One of the upgrades that we're realizing from our Tyler Technology software update is more or less real-time information being shared now between the financial system, the meter reading system, and the work order system with the folks in the trucks. So we're finally putting ourselves in a position where we should be as far as the technology. So think about the communications now that we would have as far as meter reads, meter turnoffs, new services, those type of things. Our team members will have access to that live data basically from their truck, which will make it a lot more efficient for us in terms of all the activities that they do. Commissioner, question?
Along with Vicky's question, the new meters that we just approved, I thought they didn't require people to go out in the truck. I thought that it was going to be sent.
So the new meters that we have are what we call AMI ready. So currently we read meters by driving by. Now, if we wanted to implement technology that people wouldn't have to drive by and all that information comes into a collector and then comes into our system, there's an additional cost associated with that. So the meters are ready for that.
Right.
We just have to put the technology outside of that to collect that information. But currently we actually drive through the system to collect meter reads. And you have to get rereads if someone has to change out a meter, stuff like that. We have now with laptops in the vehicles and the new Tyler technologies, we have the ability to do it on the fly instead of having to go back, printing out things, coming back, writing it, scanning it, stuff like that. We have the ability to do it all together, if that makes sense.
But I thought we approved the technology so that we didn't have to do that. I thought that's what we just approved when we approved the new
You've
meters.
approved the meters that are AMI capable. So we're installing in the ground so we can take that next step in technology to achieve that. And we also talked during that discussion that we have the opportunity in some of our neighborhoods, whether it be existing or new, to start installing some of these collectors in those neighborhoods to move us towards the AMI, the automatic meter reading type of technology, where you're not driving by, you're just collecting that information every 15 minutes, every day.
Right.
I believe there's a cellular service involved in that. Is that correct?
There's a lot of technology. There's some radios, there's cell service,
So
different technologies.
then we would have to pay for some kind of cell service for it to repeat back to.
Right.
Yeah.
So we did, about 2 years ago, we did some detailed analysis and costing on that type of program, wholesale. And Richard, I think that you were part of that. Was that a $6 or $7 million uplift?
It was millions.
Yeah, so it was about $7 million. I'll just say $6-7 million to get the entire system meters replaced and up to that new technology. And we said, we just can't afford that. So what's the next best thing we can do? Let's invest in the meters that will allow us to do that. And over time, we can start making investments. I think we would have been closer to doing that in the near term if we didn't have some of these other expenses that were dropped on us.
Mm-hmm.
So, and if we get some additional grant money, maybe there's some money out there for these type of programs that we can put towards that.
Thank you.
As far as changing out these meters, about where are we at percentage wise that we've changed? How much we got left to go?
So we have a $1 million program that the board has approved. Basically, that was primarily meter purchases, and the focus is changing out 2,200 meters in the city of Creedmoor. So we spent the last 5 years getting rid of 500, 600, 700 manual read meters. These are meters the guys actually had to go out and physically look at and write the numbers down. There was no radio read. So we've replaced all those, upgraded those. Everything that goes in the ground is new, and the board approved a contract with a meter company out of Kentucky that is scheduled to come in after the 1st of July this calendar year. We don't have the schedule yet from them, and do the installs. So once we get to that point in our system, we'll be able to look at all of the meters in our system and understand, do we have any meters less than 10 years old or greater than 10 years old? And then we'll focus on doing those replacements at the same time. But our team members are constantly replacing and upgrading meters that they find as far as, aging out, if you will, when not reporting properly or something along those lines. So we'll be able to provide you with that information probably better in the fall once we complete the program. Putting our focus and attention on the Creedmoor area upgrade is going to be very beneficial for us as far as just speed and improved accuracy of those meter reads.
So basically what we did, we're getting the equipment that has the capability, but we haven't implemented that capability because we don't have the entire system done or a great percentage of the system done. So if we were 80% done, we might talk about implementing the technology then. Would that be a fair statement?
I think that you're correct, once we get to that level of having that technology installed throughout the entire operating area, then I think you can start to entertain what the cost would be to get into a program. But again, it's very expensive, so, right?
But we do have that, the equipment does have that capability.
I would put it in these terms, which is not utility terms. It's like 2 years ago buying a 4K ready TV.
Mm-hmm.
You bought the technology, you may not have the 4K capability with your other components or even receiving that service, but when it is available, all you have to do is plug in and you're ready to go. So that's how we're positioning ourselves as well.
Yeah, so we're just working towards that incrementally.
Correct.
So I'm concerned about the fact that we got these meters and we talked about the little antenna, which does the transmitting. Am I right? I see. But we're not going to activate it. So by the time we get ready with the technology to activate it, it's not going to work anymore. We're going to need new technology.
So I think that you're assuming that the meters will fail. They're guaranteed for 20 years. So I think you're assuming that in the next 20 years, we will not install that system.
No, I'm saying that technology changes so fast that what we have today, if we don't activate it for 3 years, in 3 years, we're going to have to change something else because it will not match anymore. That's my concern.
Well, I think you should be concerned with that, but I don't think that's a reality.
Okay.
Quite honestly, with the Neptune meters that we're working with and the technology, they have a lot of backwards compatibility for their technology and use and readings. And we're very careful to ensure that we are not putting an obsolete piece of equipment in the ground to mismatch the technology. So I think we'll be okay. I think it really comes down to affordability at this point. I don't see right now on the planning horizon, based on our other costs, an additional $5, $6, $7 million sitting out there to do that. But I think that if we move towards that over time, I think there's some great benefits in doing that. All right, anything else? Okay.
I don't think so. We can move on.
We are, before you go anywhere, item 8, personnel and position review. I think now would be a great time to really take a 10-minute recess. If you would want to consider that, and then we can focus on this topic.
We're at a good place.
Okay.
Kenneth wants to take a break.
Okay.
How much time?
10 minutes is
10
fine.
minutes?
10 minutes.
All right, thank you.
Ready.
All right, well, thank you. Chair, Finance Committee members. So we're, agenda item 8, which is our FY 25-26 personnel and position review. We have 3 items here. Item A, proposed positions. Item B, compensation study update. And item C, pay period payroll transition update. So I see Priscilla is at the microphone, which is great. So we're going to talk about proposed positions. So in our budget proposal with respect to staffing, the proposed budget includes a request for 3 new positions, 1 utility inspector and 2 utility maintenance workers. The utility inspector will work for the engineering project manager and will inspect all water and sewer infrastructure occurring with new builds as well as inspect infrastructure improvements. The utility maintenance workers will work for the waterline maintenance and will complete proactive maintenance on fire hydrants and water valves, including flushing, hydrant exercises, valve exercises, and simple repairs. Adding these 3 additional positions helps SGWASA become a more sustainable utility. With the I-85 SGWASA sewer improvement project, SGWASA expects both residential and commercial developments to come into the system, warranting additional staffing resources. The utility inspector is needed for the inspecting of water and sewer lines with new infrastructure coming into the system, as well as infrastructure improvements that are needed over time. Currently, SGWASA charges $2 per linear foot for inspection of water and sewer lines, so the position can be sustainable with construction inspection fees. As SGWASA gets closer to full build-out of the utility, there may be additional utility inspectors needed, but for the proposed FY 25-26 budget, SGWASA is requesting 1 of these positions. The position is posted to be at salary grade 12. I will just finish up with the utility maintenance positions. 2 are under waterline maintenance and will help transition SGWASA from a reactive approach to a more proactive approach for asset management. Currently, there are not enough positions in waterline maintenance to complete routine proactive maintenance of fire hydrants and valve maintenance, period. On page 25 of 36, I have a chart showing you basically on the left-hand side, top left, board approved current fiscal year. FTE is a full-time equivalent equals 49. PTE is a part-time equivalent equals 0. Contract is 0 and unfunded equals 1. On the right-hand side of that table, you will see requested for the FY 25-26 budget. FTEs equal 52, PTE equals 0, contract equals 0, and unfunded equals 1. Staff looks forward to discussing this with the Finance Committee members. Attached, you have an approved FY 24-25 org chart and proposed FY 25-26 org chart. These org charts are a little bit challenging to read. I think I provided an extra copy. I thought it was a larger copy at your desk for you, but it's still, you have to squint a little bit to see it. This org chart update, basically, I'll just show you from the top of the organization down to, which one are you on? You're on the current. Could you go to the proposed, which I think is the next page? There we go. So this is the proposed budget, 25-26. And you will see on the first level, utility engineer, operations manager 1 unfunded.
Yeah.
It's highlighted in red for you. We want to keep that position out there on the chart. We will try to fill that position, but it's been a tough market space for us. So we decided this year just to unfund that instead of carrying that cost or adding that to the budget for another year. So we'll focus on that again throughout the year next year. We would very much like to have that utility engineer in that position, but we're challenged with doing so at this point. Moving a little bit further down the page, you will see under the project manager category, we have in red text, project inspector 1, new position. Just want to make sure it's clear to the Finance Committee members, the position that we're adding. And to the far left, you don't have to move the page, you'll see under the distribution network, waterline utility maintenance mechanics, we have 3 presently, we're adding 2. That's regarding the additions that we've asked for. Further on down the page, under the pump station mechanics, where you see 4, there's a note. There's not a note on that page. So there is a note that I did, there it is. Pump station mechanics helper eliminated in the proposed FY 25-26 org chart. So there's 2 boxes up. You'll see pump station mechanic and helper. Right, just leave it there, Crystal. We have determined that we benefit more from having pump station mechanics versus helper. They're licensed, they're a higher quality trained mechanic. And so with our last helper in our position most recently, resigning from the organization, we've now freed up that position slot, and we think now is the appropriate time to get that position off the chart. Let's see. So those are the requests that we have for positions. This is also an appropriate time to talk about the classification scale that we provided to you. So at first, we'll ask the committee members if you have any questions, comments, or concerns with what we're proposing this year in terms of personnel requests.
So the project inspector, I'm assuming that's the same as the utility inspector? We're calling it a utility inspector on page 24, and on the chart, we're calling it a,
Yes, ma'am, the two should be the same.
okay. Stop using different words, you're confusing me.
I apologize.
Sweet old lady, battle-tested warrior princess.
Yes, ma'am.
So the project inspector will take orders from the project manager to do all the inspections?
Correct.
That will be under that?
Yeah, and
So will it be a shared function, or,
well, there will be times when the duties will be split. That's for sure. As far as
because there's only two, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah, exactly. And if Crystal, if you would just let me see the top of the page. There we go. So we have an opportunity with the utility engineer of operations. As you can see, the one that's unfunded that would manage a lot of our superintendents and project manager and staff. That's the vacancy that we have presently. So those duties basically fall to Chris and I, basically to manage and coordinate. Chris has taken on most of that management right now of the operations manager, in addition to working with me on a lot of projects. The good news is about the project inspector is, as I mentioned in the memo, there is a revenue offset. What does that mean? So we charge basically in our rates and
Right.
fees, we have an inspection fee set up that we can apply to a subdivision that says if you're putting in 10,000 feet of water line, it's $2 a linear foot
Right.
for our inspection costs. The same with sewer. So there's an opportunity to bring in revenue to support this inspector because they're driving the need for this activity. There's other things the project inspector can do to facilitate other tasks for us, internal and other capital improvement projects that we're doing. The project inspector, I just want to make sure this is clear to the committee members. The project inspector is not the representative owner of the project. So when a project is built, you have a developer, you have a project engineer working for the developer, and you have contractors working for the engineer. That engineer is required to evaluate and inspect and ensure that they're meeting all the qualifications and the needs of the state and the organization. So what do we do? So we go out and we ensure, we do back inspections, we coordinate, we make sure that they're doing what they're supposed to do. So you can sometimes have a one project manager to many projects. It doesn't have to be a one-to-one. But again, as let's just say as building would increase over the next couple of years, you may see a request for an additional project inspector coming online. So to meet the demand, and at some point when demand falls off, you don't need the project inspectors. They kind of go hand in hand, and that's how you fund something like this. So that's what we proposed. We've also proposed in our budget some upgrades to our software and permitting to allow improved online permitting and processing, and also on-site inspections and coordination. So we're streamlining a lot of those functions as well through technology. Because what happens is you get a contractor that says, I need you out here to inspect something and look at something. We like to schedule that as well. So we're going to make some of those process improvements.
Do you think it'll be difficult to fill this position? I know we've had some difficulty in filling positions before.
Well, I'd be open to any concerns by
Sure.
Chris or perspectives by Priscilla.
I think there's a potential for an opportunity for one of two things. Is that there's potential to bring somebody in from the outside, or there's a potential to promote somebody internal to this and fill and backfill
Okay.
positions. So
All
I
right.
think there's a good potential to fill this position fairly quickly.
Okay, good.
And there's no definitive, how should I say this? The certifications that are required for this are not immense. They're
Okay.
not hard to get. You know, these are very low, I'm saying low level, but they're entry level, kind of entry level things. that
Okay.
Somebody could do.
Not an engineer, basically,
not
that
an
we're
engineer.
requesting in this position.
Right.
A lot of this stuff you can take direction from project manager or, stuff you do.
And it'll help us avoid any situations where somebody put in the wrong stuff instead of following our rules.
Very much so.
So
That's good.
Mm-hmm.
you'll find that a lot of developers and contractors try to do the bare minimum and get away with that. And our specifications are such that we try to hold them to a certain standard, sometimes equal to state standards or federal standards, sometimes above and beyond that. So we just want to make sure that our needs are met with that.
Okay.
These two new utility maintenance mechanics will report to who?
They will report to the distribution and collections supervisor, ultimately the distribution collections superintendent.
And you're eliminating, you actually have, where is that?
We are taking, if you're asking about the pump station mechanic,
Yeah, the
the
helper.
helper, yes, sir, we're taking the helper, we're eliminating that position.
Yeah.
We would like, it better fits our needs for a mechanic as opposed to a mechanic helper.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Are we gonna go in depth of what those two employees will be doing besides exercising and working on the fire hydrants? How much in depth do we wanna go into that?
Well, I'd be open to any questions that you have regarding that, but I mean, that's gonna be their primary focus.
So I've sat down with the fire chief in STEM, and he has discussed with me. I'm not sure if Creedmoor does it a certain way and STEM does it a certain way, but for their certifications, they've got to have the fire hydrant painted a certain way.
Mhm.
So have we agreed that STEM and Butner / Creedmoor would have it all done the same way and all painted the same way? Or would you go by what is allocated to that group, how they're supposed to paint it?
Well, I think that in recent discussions with Chris about this, that with the amount of work that we're going to be stepping up for managing this program, we want to make sure that there's a consistent standard applied across the SGWASA service area. So a lot of times your hydrants are color coded.
Correct.
I think that, and correct me where I go off the table here, but I think our red hydrant is a utility owned hydrant. A yellow painted hydrant would be a private hydrant. Am I good so far?
Generally, yes.
Okay, and then the different cap colors represent the different pressure zones.
Correct.
So we would like to standardize that to meet National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, standards for all the communities. So for example, I think there's a lot of silver hydrants in the town of STEM.
Correct.
Those are probably gonna go away so that we have a standard hydrant. Open for discussion, but we would,
So I'm guessing you're gonna paint them all red and then have a color code at the top.
we haven't made that decision, but I think we're leaning in that direction so that there's some consistency across the service area. We'll be
Why'd they
happy to
paint them
follow up with your
silver?
team members.
They're
So
easier to
it's pretty?
see. They're easier to see because people that are colorblind don't see red.
Oh, okay. All right.
Silver, everybody can see.
Okay.
I know this is,
Most men are red, green, colorblind. Like not most are, but men,
That are colorblind or red, green, yeah.
yes.
this might be just the fun fact, and probably not doing it today, but when I interviewed for the VA Medical Center, I had to pass the color test.
I'm
work.
colorblind, so that's why I say red. It doesn't stand out.
That means your mother's colorblind.
No, women cannot be colorblind.
It usually goes from mother to son.
Women can't be colorblind. No woman is colorblind.
I'd be happy to follow up with your team and have those additional discussions. I think they're warranted.
Like my wife will point out, hey, do you see that red flower over there? I can't see the red flower.
What about a red stoplight?
I can see that you got red on, but I can't pick it out. If there's a bunch of green, I can't pick out the red in the green.
So is the red missing? When you look at something that, do you not
Wait.
see anything, or you?
I can see what's lit up on a stoplight. I can see it's lit up, and what I see is red, but it may not be what you see
But if
is red.
there's a bush with red flowers, do you just see the bush?
If it's way off, I can't see it.
Sorry. We are way off.
Yeah, went down a rabbit hole
This took
here.
another turn.
Yeah.
Take your time, we're here all day. So, all right.
Fun fact, okay.
Don't put any red in the org chart in the
Well, I
future.
recognize that I have a little bit of red and green on that work chart behind you. I'm looking at it on the screen.
Yeah.
There's
And
also
I
an
can actually see
opportunity
the red.
we said we'd have an opportunity to talk about the classification scale, this document. Would you like to move in that direction?
Yes.
Okay. Were we able to, you did
all
a
right.
handout, correct? Okay.
And we have it on the screen as well.
Oh, we have it on the screen as well. Okay. So this is Priscilla, you want to just give us a brief overview of the table, the classification scale that we have here?
Yeah, so you can see we've got the grade, and then the status, whether they're exempt or non-exempt. The classification, job title. And then we have the minimum, the midpoint, and the maximum for each grade. And jobs listed in those grades.
Is this the proposed or today? Current.
Yeah.
Okay.
So as it relates to the two positions that we are requesting, the utility inspector would sit at grade 12, and the two utility maintenance people would sit at, I believe it's grade 9.
Yeah.
So just to mention to you again that once we receive direction from the finance committee and ultimately the board in terms of a percentage wage scale adjustment, we will change the scale and present it back to the board for review and consideration for approval.
Do you already have it typed up as to what the new scale would be? Or already have that on paper?
I'm not sure if we do. We didn't.
No.
We do
We
not.
weren't sure what percentage the board would be interested in, so we didn't do any of the calculations at this point, but that's an item we can by
And
all means bring back and put on the table at our next finance committee meeting.
the proposed was what percent?
3%.
3%, yeah.
What is the job difference between a distribution collection system supervisor and distribution collection system superintendent?
Quite a bit. So your superintendent is basically your department head in the organization. So he's working with us on putting budgets together, programs, program management, success of the department, plus managing the wastewater collection side of things. And your supervisor is basically at a next level down as far as managing your teams, your crew leaders, the work that's going on, and supporting the superintendent when the superintendent isn't there, managing programs. So they're both out in the field a lot. The supervisor's more hands-on in the field.
Okay.
Anything further on the classification schedule? No, that we'll bring back an updated schedule for you. At the end of the meeting, we'll go through a checklist of what we've heard today so that we know what to prepare for the next meeting.
Okay,
All right?
sounds good.
Okay. We can always come back to that item. Next item will be 8B, compensation study update and recommendation. So in terms of the background, June 11th, 2019, the SGWASA Board of Directors adopted a resolution approving an updated South Granville Water and Sewer Authority personnel policy. The board adopted Personnel Policy Article 2, Position Classification Plan, Section 7, Maintenance of the Classification and Pay Plan, recommends that reviews are needed approximately every 5 years due to the change over time in job duties and market pay rate changes. Included in the FY 24-25 budget was funding for the HR department to perform a classification and pay study. This was managed by Priscilla, our HR manager. The study started in August 2024 and was completed in January 2025. This pay study was conducted by the Piedmont Triad Regional Council at a total cost of $8,000. Classification and pay study was completed by Piedmont, as we mentioned currently, or previously, using pay and job classification information from the City of Durham, the City of Henderson, the City of Mebane, the City of Oxford, the City of Raleigh, the City of Roxborough, Greenville Utilities, and Orange Water and Sewer Authority as benchmarks. I think that you can appreciate the region that we looked at. It was selected from those agencies because that's basically who we're competing at in this region. Doesn't mention Charlotte Water. That's a little bit of a reach for us. At the conclusion of the study, David Hill from Piedmont Triad Regional Council met with myself, Assistant Director Summerlin, Finance Director Richard Balmer, and HR Manager Priscilla Adcott to discuss the findings. During this meeting, Mr. Hill presented SGWASA with a competitive analysis of the current market as related to the benchmark agencies. During the meeting, David Hill provided insight in several scenarios for SGWASA, for implementing changes to several positions that were identified as out of classification and or the current market rate. The three scenarios that were discussed and presented and evaluated by SGWASA were time in position, years of service, and average of time in position and years of service for each employee. All three scenarios that were evaluated produced similar results, primarily showing which employees were out of classification or pay. All three scenarios focused on a common approach to recognizing the average length of a career at 20 years in the agency and an established career midpoint of 10 years. Based on this information and reviewing several test cases across the organization, SGWASA was able to evaluate SGWASA employees who were in the correct job classifications and receiving the pay that corresponded with their experience in the position. One important note to mention is that the SGWASA Board of Directors have done a great job since 2019 to promote annual increase across the pay and classification schedule to remain competitive throughout the area. These annual increases average about 3%. However, there were some recent fiscal year increases during and post-COVID-19 that were greater than the annual average. It appears that SGWASA might have lost some competitiveness in the market related to pay, as many of the competing benchmark agencies provided wage adjustments between 5% to 15% during the COVID-19 years. In terms of a recommendation, SGWASA strives to remain competitive within the current market, yet in a fiscally responsible way. Through this analysis, there were recommendations for increasing pay for 27 of SGWASA's 49 board authorized positions. Based on all the data associated with the classification and pay study, SGWASA staff recommendation is to implement the pay changes aligned to the scenario for time in position for those employees who were identified as being out of alignment relative to the pay and classification in their position. The net increase for this classification and pay study adjustment is $85,000, and it would adjust 27 employees to align with the market salaries, basically 50% of the employees. In terms of the financial, the pay and classification study indicates that using time and position adjustment results in a net increase total of $85,000. SGWASA staff recommends the pay and classification update expense be funded from available fund balance. And based on this recommendation, the proposed use of fund balance in the proposed 25-26 budget includes $85,000 for this program. Just a note, the total proposed budget includes $197,000, which captures funding, the pay study adjustment, and the 3% wage schedule increase. So the reason we mention that note is the Finance Committee is also considering a 3% schedule adjustment that we just talked about. And there's also an $85,000 proposal for a schedule change. We wanted you to be able to appreciate that total cost for doing those two programs together. If the board approves this, we would implement this pay study basically at the beginning of our fiscal year, July 1, 2025. A lot of information. Be happy to go back and discuss any segment, any portion? Any questions or
57% is a lot.
Excuse me?
57% of the employees is a lot that were under.
Gives you perspective on the number of employees that were adjusted. Now, some adjustments were like this, some adjustments were like this. And some were were in the wrong band, so it had to be moved up to another band. So, minor adjustments to get the employees, especially time and position, on the scale. So it gives you good perspective of where we are on this.
I mean, I feel bad that 57% had to be adjusted. I don't care if it's a little or a lot. That bothers me. But I'm glad we did the compensation study to get it right.
I think I think we like to stand on that because that was a recommendation by the board and previous boards to make sure that we do not find ourselves in a position, and I've seen this in several agencies, where they don't do this for 10 years. And you're looking at costs of $200,000-$300,000 to try to get the schedule where it should be. And I think that you can appreciate that if you don't have a schedule that's competitive, you're not going to be competitive in your hiring. You're wondering why you're not able to hire, because people will leave your organization for more pay. It's just the way it is.
You know, I think this is the importance of doing a pay classification study every 5 years rather than, like you said, some organizations do them 10 years.
Yeah.
Some do them more often than 5 years, but 5 years seems to be kind of the spot that
Yes, it is.
your target area.
We'll just leave it there for now.
You're on. I can see the light. You just talk very quietly.
Just to give you a
So,
little more perspective on that.
I would like to
City of
make it-
Henderson did a pay study and
Yeah.
they had to pay out over $600,000.
Jeez.
City of Durham did one also last year, and they paid out well over $1 million. I got a
Creedmoor
large
had to do it
raise
over
last year.
2 different years because we did 50% in one year, 50% in the other. I don't remember what the number was, but we have spread it out.
How many years has it been since Durham did the pay classification?
They're doing it every 3 years now. They were doing it every 5 years, and they went to 3 years.
Okay.
NCLM suggests 3 to 5 years. We're only in the middle of the 3rd year right now. Creedmoor is. So would it be correct to say bringing these people up would bring them up to the cost of living today? Or do we bring them up with this amount of money and then it still doesn't meet the cost of living for the current year? Because what I'm thinking is what Kenneth said, originally, what Durham did was do away with the COLA and just offer a merit increase up to 5%. Since this is bringing these people up to where they should be, and it's 57% of the company that's getting it, I'm saying that in my mind covers cost of living increase to bring them up to a current cost of living.
Right. So I think the best way I can answer that is that if you start to make changes to your compensation schedule adjustment, you're going to affect where you currently are on your scheduled recommendation. It's not that we can't do that. It would be something we would want to pull back and say, what is the net effect of not doing this? Because you are now starting to teeter some of these positions. We would just have to look at them again. And maybe by reducing 3% to 2%, you're now going to increase this to get them where they need to be on the position chart where they should be based on their time and position so that we can correct that. So I think that suffice to say, I think that at a minimum, I think that the best package that we could look at here to put us where we need to be centered on this schedule would probably at a minimum the 3% wage schedule adjustment along with this change to the compensation plan that kind of does a reset for us. Once we hit that reset, now if you want to go 4% or 5% as far as the wage schedule, that's fine as well. That's your prerogative. But with this reset here, we put ourselves in a good position that next year when we're having the same discussion for the next budget, you know that we've kind of levelized the schedule at that point, and then you do 2% or 4%, everybody kind of moves in the same way. But right now you've got some double adjustments potentially that are going to have a cause and effect. on you, so we just have to be careful.
Because
about
this,
that.
this will change based on this $85,000.
Yeah, as best I remember, these pay and classification studies take a while. And usually from the time they do the pay and classification study to the time they compile everything and they get it to us, it's already a year old when it gets here, pretty much. The pay rate's almost a year old when they present the program to us. So therefore, you already, if you got any cost of living adjustment, it's not built into that.
I think you raise a good point. I don't think our data is a year old. I think we are conscious to ensure that we have the most recent data as of, I'm going to say, January 1st of this year. But it's a data capture. So it's been live since January as far as moving forward as well. There's been some changes, deletions, some vacancies that occurred at the same time. So it's kind of living with us at this point. But we know that. We calculate that into the analysis and the budget request.
So this will change based on that 85,000.
Yeah, the 3% wage schedule adjustment and any adjustments we have to make or are approved by the finance committee of the board in general, we'll see that entire schedule change to reflect what is recommended at this point. Again, kind of resetting the schedule for us.
I don't think just having January this year, I don't think the schedule would have changed that much between January and today. And COLA is for everybody. Merit-based, not everybody's going to get a merit, correct?
Right.
So I really think we need to keep the COLA and add that into, like you say, try to balance it. So I need to think about the percentage for each.
So if we do the COLA, will these people that they're bringing up they'll be brought up to what the compensation study said, and then 3% on top of that too?
Yes, if we do it that way.
I believe that it's, I don't want to misspeak here. Priscilla, do you want to say something about that?
Yes, so
Maybe, hang on a second. Maybe we look at it like this. What's suggested from the pay study is basically 24-25 budget year. What we're working on now is 25-26 budget year. Does that make sense? That the amount that they're saying these people need to be raised
Was last year's
is
amount.
24-25 analysis. Whereas the COLA and any merit increases for 25-26, which comes in effect in July. So we're using the data from last year for the pay adjustments, but you're using data for the coming year for the COLA and the. Does that help?
Even if it's 1 year, I don't see that there will be a difference as far as, I don't think the pay rate study would affect anything. I don't think they'll see a change from last year to this year.
Not that much.
And I'm sorry, Ms. Kaczynski, to answer your question too, we were careful in what you were mentioning here not to double count.
yeah,
That's what I'm concerned about,
Yes, we
because we're
intentionally went
gonna
through
lose
this,
people if that
and
happens.
We did not double count.
Right.
We wanted to make sure that was the case.
Okay.
So they would not get both
They
the
wouldn't get
merit
both.
increase and
COLA.
or the pay study increase plus an
Right.
additional 3%.
They would
Okay.
not get
so
both.
would
if your
not get both.
if your increase is over 3%, then you wouldn't get an additional 3% on top of that.
Okay,
There were many of us that won't get anything. I'm one of
except
those.
merit.
Right, so the 3% would go for positions that were in line and wouldn't get any increase because of the pay study.
And I'm more confused because
Well, what they're saying
And
is
that's why
that
we don't wanna call it
80
COLAs.
that 85,000.
To adjust the scale.
but that's
why-
really what it is.
Yes, but
It's something for everybody.
Right, and
That's how I
everybody
can
will get
distinguish
something.
it.
Well, why
But that's,
we were
these
potentially-
people that are getting this,
So-
they will get that. They won't get COLA too. They won't
Someone's
get
not gonna get
doubled. That's what
4%
Chris is saying.
Increase
That'll bring them
of
up to
their
where they
current,
should
and then
be.
get another 3%.
That wouldn't be fair. That's what
Well,
I
actually-
I understand that too, but maybe I've got a generation
That's
gap
what
here.
No,
Yeah,
I would,
you're
that's
fine.
why I think merit is a better choice because it's based on your performance.
Right.
Suffice to say, I think that the reset of the schedule, as far as we understand it, and not to, what was the term that you used, not to double.
Not to
Double
count.
Not to
Right.
Double dip.
Yeah.
Just think of it this way, the 3% wage schedule increase.
It's
that's
already in there.
proposed and the 85 coupled together gets us where we need to be. That's a really good position. If you start to go below that, it starts to say, well, wait a minute, if you're gonna go 2%, then I have to go higher here to get them where they were recommended to be. So there's still some values that have to change. So just if you walk away with something, just think about that. The 3% plus the 85 really gets us where we need to be on the schedule reset.
Well, it sounds better as far as this percentage going out. And what were your thoughts, Kenneth? Because I thought you were also thinking they would be added together.
I'm good. I understand what they're trying to do because the city of Durham just did it last year.
Okay.
So we were very methodical when we looked at the data to ensure that there was not double counting, to make sure everybody was accounted for in this calculation. The whole thought was, if you can, we had to split it out, pay study versus 3%, whatever you call this.
Mm-hmm.
But we wanted to make sure that there was not overlap of this to separate the two, but at the same time, we wanted to make sure that it was equitable for everybody in this.
We had some people last year that got 20% raises.
Because they were so far behind. But they didn't get the 20% plus COLA.
Oh, they got. We don't get COLA.
Those are
You get a
probably
merit
more-
increase.
Those are probably more compression studies, so they take the employees that are 10 to 20 year range, and those are the ones who usually get the majority.
That's correct. The first starting didn't get nowhere near what the people that have been there 20
The pay
years.
scale over time.
Right.
And so there's potential to bring somebody in new who's making at
Close to what somebody's been there 4 years.
Somebody's been there for a length of time. So that's what the compression study, it offsets that.
All right. lot of
Okay, we
information,
can move on, I think.
Lot to digest
Yep,
on this.
I got it.
Okay, well, very good. Next item is the payroll transition update. 8C.
Thank you, Priscilla.
That was me.
Somebody from the audience?
I said, this is taking too long. I want the payroll transition update to be done.
I would, happy to jump to page 32 on the status if you would like, instead of reading you 4 paragraphs of information. I will be happy to go back, but you have the information in front of you. So on page 32, the status, the board of directors provided staff with their input to ensure all employees receive pay during the 6-week transition period. The transition period is basically going from one payroll type processing to another. The associated expense for this project is included in the budget at a cost of $162,206. Staff is requesting the Finance Committee consider using existing fund balance for this one-time cost. The legal review has been concluded. The upgraded financial software will be implemented by 7/1/25. The proposed budget includes $11,220 for automated timekeeping software implementation. The software will be implemented in the fall of 2025, allowing employees to record, process their time via the new software automation. Due to the end of the calendar year benefit time calculations and rollover into the new calendar year, the proposed date for payroll transition is Feb 2026. Staff looks forward to discussing this topic with the Finance Committee members. So all the members know how we got here. Would you like us to review the 6-week gap or the payroll transition period from end of month?
Somebody just brought up, how much money did we approve for this? Do you recall?
I thought it was 150,000. I thought that's what the motion and the approval was by the board was for 150, which is what I had said at the time was if it's going to be a year out, it's going to go up, and apparently it has.
Mhm.
So can we double check to see what the board approved before we? Because I believe we approved 150,000, and it might have been an NTE. 150,000.
We will check that board item in discussion for sure. To see what the language was that was adopted. I'll have to check that month when that was done, but we can definitely research that if you'll make a note of that, Chris. Yeah, be happy to do that.
Because it was a round number, and I'm pretty sure it was 150,000.
Well, we'll pull up the legislation so that we have that.
Do you remember when we did that?
It tells us we did it, and
I mean, we approved 150,000.
then we did it in October of 2023.
Okay, so if we did it in October 2023, technically, if that money wasn't used, it went back to the fund balance. Is that correct?
It never was budgeted.
Yeah, it was never budgeted.
No,
It was
It
just
was the idea
It
that,
was approved, but not. Okay.
we knew it was coming.
right, at some
Oh,
point,
okay.
we said,
Okay.
we recommended last year in our budget that when we get to that point in time, when we're ready to do the transition, that we bring the item to the board, discuss the actual costs related to that, and get, I think we're going to suggest the use of fund balance for that project. We never got to that point to even bring that item to the board, so it didn't sit in the budget. So this year, we're actually placing it in the budget. So it resides in there, so there's no discrepancy on what the value was or what we were aiming for in this program.
Okay.
And that projected cost does assume all the things brought to you in the proposed budget as far as the increase. So that's assuming that you adopt a pay plan, that you include a merit, include a COLA. So that would explain why over 2 years, as you said, it has grown roughly $12,000. And that number is fluid, I will say, for the finance director. When I bring, if you get to the day of implementation, of course, you're gonna have turnover and changes and so forth. So it won't be exactly to the dollar that number is, but that's the current projection based on current staff.
So by saying that number is fluid, it will be based on the number of employees we have at the time that it actually changes. So
That's correct.
that number could fluctuate up or down.
That's correct. And what their current pay rate is at the day of transition,
Okay.
which could be higher or lower with turnover. You may have vacancies, so it could be lower if you had 10 vacancies, that sort of thing. So that's what I mean by fluid. It's based on the pay rates at the time the transition occurs.
Okay.
I knew it was going to change because we had so much time in between.
Okay.
Okay, let's-
Anything further on
I
that
don't
item?
think so.
No? All right. Moving on to item 9, proposed budget, other topics. Capital improvement program, proposed plan update. And item A, 9B, review and discussion of existing budget ordinance section 3. And 9C, PFAS CIP funding. So moving to capital improvement program, proposed plan update. Let's see, in terms of the background, SGWASA has a 10-year capital improvement plan. The current board approved the 10-year FY 24 through 34 CIP that included SGWASA's financial obligations, $6.8 million for the I-85 sanitary sewer SGWASA improvement project. That money is expensed in schedules during FY 24, 25, and 25, 26 of the 10-year plan. Due to that funding required for the project, many of the CIP projects that were scheduled for design and construction during the next few fiscal years were pushed out several years. Due to the minimal funding available for CIP beyond the sewer improvement project, the focus during the next few years will be to concentrate funding on developing water quality engineering, design, and construction projects, especially those projects related to PFAS removal. This approach allows SGWASA to identify future projects and their associated costs, thus providing SGWASA with the opportunity to seek additional grant funding and to have projects shovel-ready when projects are added back to the CIP. The recommendation is the 10-year CIP update from 25 to 35 will be updated in July 2025 and then presented to the Board of Directors in August 2025 for their review and approval. And again, the reason for that is that we do a closeout of the current fiscal year. We have estimated values that we can plug into the CIP schedule. Richard actually gives me the actual values. We take those actual values that we can use for funding, and then we fine tune our list to match projects that we can afford to do on that schedule with available funding. Then we have opportunities to seek additional grant funding and so on and so forth. So look for that document to come back to you in August for that review and discussion. It's going to be very lean. If you take a look at this year's CIP in the next fiscal year, with us being heavily engaged financially in the IU5 sewer project, just taking the bulk of the money out of that CIP for that. Any questions or comments on that approach?
Any comments? Okay.
I do know we have a bunch of houses that are just waiting to start currently. So I know a lot of the funding, what's coming in is going to be going up quickly.
That's great news.
I think that we're looking forward to some of the increased revenue just from water and sewer consumption from those new neighborhoods. I think that's going to be the continuing trend here for a long time, which is good. Good news for the utility to be able to take that money and reinvest it back in the utility system where it's
correct.
Needed. All right, moving on. 9B, review and discussion of budget ordinance section number 3. Richard, you want to just give us an overview of this? You've got a couple of questions or comments, correct?
Sure.
Okay. Pardon me?
We don't have a legislature.
I do not have a report on that, no. So I did give them there is a copy of ordinance section 3, which is pretty much a copy and paste from the existing budget ordinance.
Very good. Yeah, the finance department wanted to bring back an item. The ordinance, budget ordinance section 3, as you can see there, authorizes the executive director to move between line items within a department, which doesn't affect the budget ordinance itself. It's not a reappropriation of up to $10,000. And then report it to the board so that can be approved internally. As some of the finance committee members may recall, that was increased, I believe, 2 years ago or 3 years ago.
2 years ago.
From 2,500 to 10,000. But you notice on your agenda this past week that we have a kind of an unusual budget amendment, and it raised some questions, I think, with board members, but it also, as Ruben and I looked at it, preparing it, we said, well, is this the proper way to do it? So a few things related to that ordinance. Maximum of $10,000. Is that, one of our questions was, is that cumulative? So if the budget amendment is moving $20,000, but it's not one line item that is affected by $10,000, then is it eligible for internal approval or not? Does it require board approval? And I think the other question was, how often and when does the board want it reported? Now, we captured that in the bottom section of the ordinance that you saw Tuesday night and approved, because we had a budget amendment at the top that was requiring $10,000 and above board approval. So we put the reporting section at the bottom that basically said for information only internally approved, as you saw. So that's kind of some guidance. We wanted some guidance from the finance committee on how is your interpretation of the 10,000? Is that one single line item, or is it cumulative if there are multiple line items within that single budget amendment?
How do you think it needs to work?
I think it should be cumulative, but that's up to the finance committee.
I have had this question at the city also, because we gave our city manager a right to approve up to X amount of dollars. And I'm like, is that for each time? Can he do this daily, monthly, weekly? Is it cumulative for the year? Or there's really no specifics on these issues until a board makes the decision that it is cumulative or not. But yeah,
I
it's,
think that's correct, and I don't think there's any state guidance, LGC
there's
guidance
nothing.
related to how often you report it. That's board specific. So we thought now was an appropriate time as we're gonna start exercising this possibly more, to be more nimble in operations. That now let's come to the finance committee and see, how this finance committee,
So what if we have two signatures? So just say he has an issue that he needs to bring generators in, and it's such and such cost, whatever, that Chris also signs off on that.
Would that
So-
be an emergency?
then that would probably fall under the emergency authorization, and I think you have up to 80,000 in that case. Or
It's
60,000?
yeah.
90,000.
Yeah.
So if it's an emergency, we have a mechanism in place to accommodate that, where, that's not, this is kind of more of a routine, general, just shifting budgets between line items.
Can you give an example?
Sounds good.
Well, the example would be the one that we just did, the budget amendment that we just did, where you're moving several small things, supplies, permits, between, let's say, sludge removal, and you're moving it to other items, vehicle maintenance, that sort of thing. Right now, all of those are under 10,000, even cumulative within that department. But then the ones that you approved the other night were repairs and maintenance. And they happen to be coming from one line item to another line item within the same department. So it's not affecting appropriations, not affecting your overall budget. Those happen to be 12,000, let's say. So that, we said, okay, that's one line item above 10,000, has to have board approval based on this section. But suppose it wasn't 12,000 that was being moved from one place to another place. Suppose it was two line items that were 6,000 each. The cumulatively, they still equal 12,000, but it's not affecting any one line item. In the example, 6,000.
Well, I think you're kind of in charge of the finance, so I think it would be however you deem this, you would like to see this.
How the usefulness,
Do you have anything that you want to do?
How would it look to an auditor that's going over the records?
Exactly what I was saying. However you think it would be seen.
Well, you're talking to an auditor from, it's been almost 18 years, but for 20 years I was an auditor. And I would have interpreted it as cumulative. That if you're moving more than 10,000 in that budget amendment, BAR, internally approved budget amendment request, that's the safest way, let's say. Then you don't get into the gray area because you're taking the safest method, right? If you went that it has to be one single line item, then you could have an auditor that says, no, I interpret that to be cumulative. So you violate that ordinance. But
we don't want
again,
to
if the
violate.
finance committee clarifies it, and we could even alter the language possibly in the ordinance based on the finance committee's guidance to be clear in the ordinance, and then you don't get into future discussions about that. I don't think there's any restrictions on that in the ordinance language, right?
No, as long as, see, like, how it is currently, we don't amend the ordinance because it's within a line in the department.
Right.
The scenario I was thinking about in my head was, let's say the water treatment plant comes to the executive director, we want to move $6,000 for whatever. Well, 3 weeks later, they say, oh, I need another 6,000 for something else. Does that go over the $10,000 threshold, or is that still okay for the executive director to approve on his own?
So we need a period of time for cumulative.
And I think that goes to what you may have just mentioned with Creedmoor, is that what is the period of time for the 10,000? Is one single BAR? Is it within a month? Right now, I don't interpret it to have a time limit.
Right.
But you don't want your superintendents or personnel coming to the executive director or the assistant director and saying, okay, well, I know the limit's 10,000, so I'm only going to move 9,000, but next week I'm going to ask for another 5.
Right.
You don't want to split it up like that.
So because I hate budget amendments,
We know.
everybody here knows it. I think $10,000 a month, because it would be easier for the finance department to determine that up to $120,000 a year can be moved. Not to exceed $10,000 a month.
I'm trying to think of an example. Would 10,000 consider to be an emergency if somebody came to you and said they needed money for so-and-so? Would that be an emergency, or they just forgot to ask for something that routinely used during the workday?
That's a good question. So, to Mr. McLamb's point, there's a difference in an emergency and a lack of planning. Is where you're, I think,
Yes.
thinking. That sounds like what you're thinking. So, we certainly don't want to get in a situation where it's a lack of planning, but you want the executive director to be nimble enough to where, if that situation occurs, he can certainly approve an expenditure. Again, with the 10,000, even if you set it per month, that I think that may be too restrictive, because you may have a 10,000 transfer today at the water plant department.
Mm-hmm.
Now you've tied the executive director's hands so that he can't approve one tomorrow for a water line situation in the water line department. So I don't know that the per month 10,000 is I think that defeats a lot of the nimbleness or the authority you want to give the executive director. You're tying his hands somewhat in that.
So
but that
are you
again is the finance committee's decision, not mine.
Well, are you thinking more per department? I mean, what kind of restriction do you think? Or do you think none? Leave it the way it is. I'm trying to ask your opinion.
I think we can leave it the way it is. It's because it says within a department up to 10,000.
Yeah.
Now, if you want to add a restriction per a month, that's totally up to you. But I think you're okay with the within a department. We just need to decide within a department, is that cumulative? If they ask 3 different times during a month or 2 months or 3 months for $9,000 each, have you exceeded the 10,000?
Well, I mean, I haven't personally experienced this, but I know there's been issues in certain of the departments I used to work with, and to hear how something can come up. Okay, this is not really what's going on. This is something else going on. One led to another. I don't know. I'm just trying to come up with a scenario. You could probably, maybe you needed more items than you thought you did initially.
That's bad planning.
Would it be,
That's poor planning.
But I mean, if something occurred that wasn't,
Keep in mind too, things adjust over time. So, if you use chemicals as an example, okay, chemicals were $35 per whatever before, and then all of a sudden we had COVID hit, and now they're $70 for something. So, you have the ability within your budget to adjust for that accordingly, and those are some potentials that you can think about outside of what you're thinking here.
how would it work if you did, the 10,000 per 40,000 cumulative per month?
Kind of have a tiered approach.
Up to 40,000 cumulative. That means you could have 10,000 in 4 different departments without having to come forward. And then, once you reach that threshold of 40 and within a month, then
Well, that's totally up to the finance committee and ultimately the board when we bring an ordinance forward. I think the more complexity you add to it, the more difficult it may be to administer effectively.
You have something to say, little man? Step up.
I was getting ready to say, Scott, what are you wanting to see out of this?
All right, so
That was my next question.
you charged me with managing an $18 million budget. That's what's proposed this year, okay? Keep that in mind.
$10,000 doesn't go very
You give
far.
me the authority to approve up to $90,000 in an emergency. You've also given me the authority to spend $30,000 on a single transaction without going to the board. Just keep those numbers in mind. So when you look at this item of 10,000, what are we trying to solve here? What's the issue? Because we have the ability and exercise it all the time to bring appropriation requests to the board as needed. So really, what does this allow me to do? I think that it's in place to allow for some adjustments within the budget. That's basically what we're doing, is we're moving money around in a department. So I have an approved budget by the finance committee or an amended budget, and I know that there's certain monies in there that can be moved around for the operation. We're not touching salary and benefits, we leave that alone. But there are times when you have to make adjustments, and you just do that as the normal course of business. So you make those adjustments. But we have a lot of tools available to us financially, board amendments, budget amendments, emergency appropriations. I think we're covered pretty well. I think that, not speaking for Richard though, it's just how do we classify this and bring this forward to the board? How often do you want to see this, that during the month of April or March, for example, the executive director moved $80,000 within all budgets and did not exceed the budgets, just simply moved money around because that was the demand. I mean, that's really kind of what we're talking about as far as fiscal responsibility here. But again, I'm not sure what we're aiming for, what we're trying to solve here, but we do want some clarification. That's what we're trying to get from the finance committee.
Well, one thing I'd like to see, and it came up in this past year, was a project resolution where a project is complete. We estimated it was going to be $160,000 and it came in at $120,000. I would like to see, or maybe we do it already, but a closeout on that project where we see that $40,000 that was not spent on that budget go back to the general fund, not just kind of float out there for the next situation that might come up. That's too wishy-washy for me. I want to say, budget, the project ended, it came in over budget, under budget. If it's over budget, I know we're going to get a budget amendment on it. But if it comes in under budget, I want to see the transaction where that money goes back to the general fund so we know, because I think there was one project where there was money left over and it went to something else in that department and it just didn't feel right to me. But that's just me. I don't speak for the whole board. But a report that the project is done and the cost was this, and you did it for the water plant when we did the water plant upgrade, or Mark did it, somebody did it, and we had a report on it.
We used to do that. The engineer would give us back in the old days, they would give us kind of a closeout.
That's what I would like to see us start to do.
They do a change order for the closeout. So it was going to be 15 million. Let's say it came in at 14 million. They're not going to spend the other million. The project's closed, closing documents are done. They give us a closeout, what they call a change order, just like you do when you have a contract change.
Right.
And then we would bring an associated budget amendment back to the board, which is what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
It takes that money now and puts it back in fund balance. It's not sitting out there in the budget anymore. And we can certainly do that on projects as they close out, or POs as they close out. We can bring budget amendments. Now, recognize that mean you're going to see more budget amendments, but at least these hopefully are ones you want to see because the money is coming in under budget.
But if we do that, won't that eliminate some of these appropriations? Because if there's money left over from a project and something else in that department needs to be done, we're moving that money from that's a line item change.
Now let me clarify. I'm not aware of situations where we've taken board-approved capital projects and diverted that money to other causes. Typically, if the board approves the money for a given project, then any leftovers does not get diverted to other projects.
Okay.
And I'm very firm about that. The board said it must be used for this and it has to stay for that. So I'm not aware of a situation where you're talking about that. But we can certainly do a budget amendment right after any project closes.
For the closeout.
That puts back in fund balance, and then you won't have that concern.
To my knowledge, when we have remaining funds for a capital improvement project, you will recall at the end of the fiscal year, Richard does a major adjustment budget amendment.
Right.
That's
That
right.
captures all that balance remaining and puts it right back into it memorializes the fund it goes back into. So
Right.
he's doing that on an annual basis. He kind of sweeps all those funds, takes all that money and puts it right back in. So if you wanna see that done individually on projects, it can be done, but
Yeah.
but do know that he does take that and puts it right back into the CIP fund or whatever appropriate fund
Yeah.
that money belongs
Because
to.
it, at the end of the year, when he does it, I don't think we itemize it to every single project, or do you?
Well, what the board gets typically in July is you'll get the CIP annual, I
Right,
call it activity. It's a one page of here's what we're gonna put in the
Yeah.
CIP fund balance. Here are the projects the board had authorized, and here's the money that was expended. But it doesn't show on there that you budgeted 15 million and spent 14 million. It just shows that
total,
a million
accumulative.
extra is going back into fund balance.
Okay, but I would like a closeout when we finish the project. I liked them when Mark did them because easier to follow. And then at the end of the year, you'll do your thing and it'll all just reiterate the same information.
It's not a bad reporting tool for the board, so I have no.
It's easier for us. It's easier for me to keep track.
But with this item, to Scott's point, we're just asking you, do you want to see it? Let's assume we don't have a budget amendment this month. There's nothing that the board needs to move. But we did internally move some items. Do you want that reported in like a memo type budget amendment that doesn't require board action? Do you want it quarterly? Do you want it every 6 months? That's what we're seeking guidance on.
Yeah, now I like in the ordinance it says subsequent. Does that mean the next board meeting or the next? Can it be the next 2 or 3
Quarter or
meetings?
6 months or something like that.
We just wanted to make sure we weren't not following the intent of the board in the ordinance.
I would like to
That we-
see monthly.
Okay.
What do you think, Ken?
I think whatever our finance guy tells us is best is that we put him in that place to look over this money. That's for him to decide what he needs to do.
But you are saying you're going to share what our director has moved.
You'll always see it. I just want to know what frequency. The reason I was thinking, let's say we had one transfer this month and it was $500 from office supplies to whatever. It seems to Mr. Chinsky's point, you hate to have a budget agenda item to show you that Scott moved $300 or $500 that month. So in times when the numbers are small, it seems more appropriate that you wouldn't want to be cluttered your agenda for 3 months with one little item. You may want to see it at the end of the
Quarterly.
quarter.
I agree.
Okay.
I agree with that.
Yeah.
I think quarterly would be.
Work. So let me just ask another question. So how many times this past year did you see or notice that this would benefit you?
Can you clarify?
The benefit having our executive director to have the 10,000 up to the maximum of 10,000 for reappropriations.
Using what, please?
The 10,000 authority. We haven't used that much in the past.
You haven't moved funds around within budgets.
I think previously we always kind of waited until the next board meeting when we had a budget amendment to have the board approve it. We never really exercised the executive director's authority. We always got that before.
I was just wondering how many times, because this is being presented, it sounded like it would be useful. I was just wondering the opportunity of last year. How many times do you think it would have been helpful to have this?
I would say last fiscal year, probably none. To Ruben's point, we used to just wait until the next board meeting, which was typically within 30 days, of course, and we'd roll it in there. But I would say in the last 2 months, you saw on your agenda a capture of all of them, and it was maybe, 5, I think, 4? So 4 or 5 in the last 30, 45 days, let's say. And as I said at the onset, I think we're going to use this more frequently. But since this particular one this past month was a new animal in the agenda, we thought it was appropriate at this time to bring it back to the finance committee and say, how often do you want to see it? What format do you want to do?
Okay.
That sort of thing.
So, yeah, we do quarterly financial updates to the board, presentations. Richard goes through a lot of information. It could be a part of that presentation or a document on
Okay.
that item as well that can say that here's just a written record for that, if that would suffice, right? It'd be a good opportunity to have them align at that point.
I think that would be the perfect place to have it as part of a new section to that
Right.
quarterly presentation. The only exception would be I would need to bring you something different in June, simply because we do not do that quarterly presentation. It's fourth quarter because the auditor rolls it into their audit process.
Okay, I think I understand better.
So even reporting on a quarterly basis, the board of directors, right? You're looking for a change in the language to section 3, correct?
I think, yes, I think we can.
So we're trying to memorialize a change to section 3 that you see on your screen, so that when we would bring this proposed budget ordinance back for a final to the finance committee, it would have probably have a strike through or an underline so that you can see what words were added. And if the finance committee is okay with that, then when we produce a final draft budget, it would be included in that as well.
Okay, for the members here of the committee, are you good with the 9B? But we need to put a period of time in there? Or leave it without? Or we can discuss it.
Talking about reporting it to us quarterly and stuff like that?
Yeah.
Yep,
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
I'm good.
Okay, all right. I'm gonna suggest, see if our executive director agrees. 9C, I think that's gonna be a good discussion. Can we do this on April 25th, or do you feel like we need to dig into it a little bit?
As long as on the 25th, can we get, Davenport Finance charged the city of Creedmoor $20,000 to do what they did for us. I don't know what Reftelis would charge us to do this, but as long as, I would like to talk about it on the 25th, and if you could give us an idea of how long it would take and how much it's going to cost, that would be extremely helpful. Because we only really have until October to kind of make up our minds on how we're going to finance this project, right? Because we're going to decide on our treatment plan in October.
Right, so just a couple of items here. I think it would be very challenging for us to solicit proposals in a week to get them back to the next meeting for discussion.
That's true, you're right.
Because we don't know what we're aiming for yet, but I think that if we could at least have the discussion, and we will discuss this internally on what we think we would be looking for, what we can offer, and then we can start to develop a scope of work so that if we want to move in this direction, we can say this is what we understand the scope to be. And then we can have that discussion, then we know what we're going out for, and we move forward from there. And then we would consider the amount of time it would take to produce that information, and then also have that discussion with the board. So I think that one of our concerns was, or one of our considerations is, again, how much information can we provide internally without paying for that expense?
And that's where I was going.
Could it be quicker?
If Richard and Ruben are fine with coming up with a plan for us or options for us for this funding,
That's what we'll talk about.
then we don't need this. But I just know that it's a big project, it's a lot of money. And I just know that this is going to be quite a decision to decide how we're going to
And you're
come up
right.
with this funding.
And this coincides with us determining how we're going to proceed with design bid build or design build contracts. So if you're going to a design build contract, then you have to have this problem solved sooner than later, because it's a fast track is what you're doing. So those are things that we have to consider. So.
Which one of the emails that I got after our last meeting was, how fast can we expedite this? I'm like, I have no idea.
Expedite this meaning that which
Get it
part of
done.
this?
Get it done faster.
What? Yeah. Yeah. Time will tell.
As soon as you loan us $21 million.
Do you want me to write you a check right now? I knew that was coming. I had my pen ready to go, and it's green, the color of money.
Okay. Yep. All right. Well, that'd be a great topic for the next meeting. So we'll make sure that that's on there. All right. So Chair, thank you very much. And committee members, a lot of information to get through.
Yes.
I don't think that, you tell me where you want to go from here. We can review a checklist of every item we talked about today, or give you an opportunity to digest all this information, scribble your notes, and come back to us at the next finance committee meeting and give us some decisions, because we'll be at that point in the
Right.
next meeting that we're going to need decisions and a recommendation from the finance committee to move this budget forward. I will ask today, if you think it's appropriate, was there anything that was outside the lines that we really need to consider here as far as adding or scrapping or anything like that, or any programs that are just an absolute no for your consideration? So any guidance that you can give us or previews would be helpful as we sit on this information for 2 weeks.
Right.
That's kind of what we're doing.
I think from the questions we asked and the topics, we can go from there.
Okay.
If you have a list of those, I think, Chris, were you taking notes?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I don't know if we have enough on decisions though from the finance committee, quite honestly, that as soon as we hit this topic list, it's going to generate additional discussion. And I'm not sure, you tell me if that's where you want to be this afternoon, having these discussions.
I think everything y'all brought up was spot on. In my
Yeah.
opinion, I think we were, at least I was always, whether yay or nay, and I would always say yay or nay. I'm going to definitely voice my opinion.
So for what I would suggest is, can we go through each individual thing and, get a consensus, or do you want to?
I think that's going to generate more discussion.
Okay.
And I'm not sure if the finance committee wants to generate another hour or two of discussion this afternoon based on their schedule. It's up to the committee.
Was everybody in agreement with everything that was brought up?
Well, I had a couple, like the 401k. I'd like to leave it at 3%. You were saying to raise it to 4%.
Well, after she did her findings, I think that we have to do that regardless. And we can always look at the 401k again next year. So if we're doing the $85,000 this year, then next year we can probably do the 401k to add the additional percent back.
Okay, so you're okay with 3%?
I am.
Mm-hmm.
Can I get the 3% increase for the position classification scale? I won't use the other word. Can I get an idea of how much that's going to cost, since we're not doing it for everybody's getting 80? The 57% are getting the 85,000. Can I find out what that 3% for the other?
Just that number alone was $112,000.
How much?
$112,000.
Okay, and that's the 3% COLA for the rest.
That was 3% for anybody who did not receive at least 3% with the paid study.
Okay.
Did I phrase that correct?
No, that's if you gave 3% and had no pay study, it cost 112.
Okay.
If the 85,000 is what it's costing you for those people who went above.
Okay, so it's the 85 minus the 197. Got it.
That's correct. And one thing to say about that is those two numbers. Those numbers are not just pay; they're pay and benefits. So you've got to remember there's about 25% of that number that is taxes, retirement percentage.
Okay.
So that's not.
It's not salary only.
85,000 in actual pay going to employees. 25% of those numbers is actually going to benefits, taxes, elders.
Yeah.
So
And
A truck's going to cost a lot more money. I'll tell you that much.
and I agree with Kenneth on the 401k. I'd like to see it move to 4, but I think we're good with doing a halt at 3 this year to kind of get more data to see where we're going with that. The other thing that hadn't been mentioned that I tend to harp on is the depreciation, and holding it at 95%. I always want to see, I'd like to see us get back to 100%. We used to be, years ago, before Scott came here, we were at 100%. But then right before Scott came here, we reduced it to 85% as a stopgap to stave off some rate increases. And we've been gradually raising it, and we've managed to get from 85 to 95. But I'd like to see us get on track with the goal of getting it back to 100%. But I'm okay with leaving it at 95 this year. And, maybe look at 1 or 2% increase next year to get it up to 96 and 97%. I'm not wanting to take a big bite at one time, but
So are you proposing that you want to alter the schedule? Because it looks like the budget, we have a goal of achieving 100% within 5 years.
within 5 years. Okay, as long as we stay on track with that, that's good. And even if we had to go a little beyond that,
I'm afraid to ask this question.
it's,
keep asking questions.
Okay,
He's
pushing water.
Richard and Ruben,
Uh-oh.
yeah,
At the end of the meeting every time.
what what is the balance in unrestricted?
You're talking fund balance? I
Yep.
assume? Okay, so I'll give you the same lecture I've given you probably since day one. As a enterprise fund, we don't, and a weird enterprise fund, and I'll explain what I mean by that for the new members of the committee. So as an enterprise fund, we don't really look at fund balance per se like a city or county does.
Okay,
First of all, if you looked at our balance sheet, our fund balance is way different than our available cash, and we'll talk about that in a minute. Why are they different? Because the way SGWASA was formed by folding in these systems, the infrastructure that was given by those systems or purchased from those systems became fund balance. Well, we know that you can't sell the water plant if you need cash. So even though it's in fund balance, it's not real cash available, liquid fund balance. So what we always look at is available cash. What's the available cash? The available cash right now, and that's of course static at any given time, is approximately 24 million. Now we don't solidify that number until the audit's done, because then you capture all your payables, your contracts and everything at that point. So it is somewhat fluid, but that's approximately what it is at this point.
okay,
So operating fund balance is approximately 24 million
okay,
at this moment in time.
okay.
So, let me just kind of circle back with the chair. I think I was proposing initially that we kind of firm up the budget at the next finance committee meeting. Are we still on that track?
I think we are.
Okay,
I think everybody's on track for that.
okay, just want to make sure.
Yep,
All
so,
right, so we do have the next meeting scheduled, already, same place,
right,
2 weeks out, same board meeting room. And, if you would allow me, I'll just kind of go around the table and see if there are any questions or comments before we wrap up from the team.
That's right, no.
No, I don't have any.
Okay. Priscilla?
No.
Anything? No? And I have none, but on behalf of the staff, we just thank you for your time and your attention to this important budget, and we look forward to working with you at the next meeting to solidify our budget. So I'll toss it back to you, Chair.
well, I really appreciate, the agenda and the information you gave us today to work with. I think we had a good discussion. I think it was very, productive. I think good questions came out of it, and good exchange, and lots of good information for us to think about. But I think we will be ready, April 25th, to confirm some things for you for consensus.
Very good.
So I think we're doing good.
Awesome.
It's 12 o'clock or a little after.
Okay.
You ready for adjournment?
anytime.
All right.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay. You want to stay here?
Kevin's gonna run away.
Okay.
Ready to go.
We're ready to go.
Thank you.
Okay.